Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Jake, the Muslim Metaphysician, and today I'm doing something a bit different here. The stream is called Testing the Trinity Live. So I invited a bunch of Trinitarian Christians behind the scenes on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, different social media platforms to come on and discuss the Trinity. And for those who don't know, I recently debated Christian scholar Dr. James White. And I'm sure that you guys have seen it by now. If you haven't seen it by now, what are you waiting for? Happened on Thursday, a couple days ago, on James White's YouTube channel. I want to say unfortunately, but at the same time, not unfortunately, it went exactly as I expected. I could have wrote the script down and people would have thought that, wow, Jake is kind of prophetic with this, how he knew that this was exactly what was going to happen. So people who know me and spoke to me personally know that this is exactly what I said was going to happen. I'm going to present clear arguments, and I'm going to win the debate by the fact that Dr. White will be unable and actually refuse to even attempt to address my argumentation, which is exactly what happened. He didn't give a single argument really against Tawheed other than simply stating that the Quran supposedly misrepresents the Trinity. This is a silly argument. It's been responded to many times. I responded to it very easily. And other than that, he had no argument against my position. That was literally like his own argument, his only argument. And he didn't respond to any of my argumentation other than simply admitting that the Trinity can't be known apart from special revelation, but eternally begotten, the LPT, the tritheism objection and defining monotheism, being person. He didn't address any of these things. It was just complete waste of time as far as an actual productive debate. You know, it wasn't a waste of time in the sense that I don't regret doing it whatsoever. And I would enjoy debating Dr. White again. And for those who don't follow me on Twitter and social media, you guys need to follow me on Twitter, because right now, over the past couple of days after the debate, Dr. White and I have been getting into a little Twitter feud. So I would recommend, if you guys want to follow that, you can see there's three main threads where we went kind of back and forth on a particular point where Dr. White he's just totally wrong. He doesn't understand even what Calvin wrote and what Calvin meant by what he said. He doesn't even understand what the early Nicene church fathers actually believed and what was meant by the term eternally begotten and the fact that it was a causal notion. He doesn't understand any of that. Honestly, I don't think he was being dishonest. I think he's literally ignorant of these facts. Now, I've challenged him to debate me on this specific issue. Debate me on this specific issue of the Nicene Creed and eternal generation. I would do it if Dr. White hopped on the screen right now. I would debate him. I'll debate him tomorrow on eternal generation and Nicene Creed, because he doesn't know the material. He doesn't understand it. And it's really a bit silly that a Muslim who is studying these things has to teach somebody who's a Christian and claiming to have been teaching church history for years, for 20 years or what, I don't know, whatever his status is, however long he's been teaching this stuff. But anyway, so post-debate, we've had a few people review the debate. There were two or three Christian channels, and then there was one Muslim channel, which is TAP, which I'm also a part of, which at 3:30 Eastern time, which is 8:30 UK time, I'll be jumping off of here and joining TAP live to be doing a debate review of the apostate prophet discussion, which was another debacle. It was basically the same thing. I was asking a very simple question, apostate prophet, whether or not anything exists is contingent. Very simple thing, like a pen, whether or not a pen is necessary or contingent. He couldn't answer that. And he said, it's irrelevant. Same thing with Dr. James White. Asked him a simple question, whether or not when he says the Father is God, what does it actually mean? He couldn't tell me what it meant. He refused to tell me, and he said, it's irrelevant. I asked him if it was an is of identity or an is of predication. He refused to answer the question. He said it's irrelevant. The fact that that point, I think he's just being dishonest, because I don't think he actually believes that it's irrelevant. But if he actually believes that it's irrelevant, then he's just totally ignorant. Sorry to break it to the audience and to Dr. White. And I told him this on Twitter as well. But let's see what we got going in the chat. We got a bunch of people in the chat. This stream is going to be for Trinitarian Christians to come on the stream and defend their position on the Trinity. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to post a link in the chat, StreamYard link, to be able to join the stream. I will pin it at the top. So any Christians, Trinitarians that want to join the stream and defend their position, I'd be happy to have a discussion with them. Now, one of the reasons also why I did this stream was because 2 or 3 Christian channels reviewed the debate. And although they thought that I won, at least they had the honesty to admit that I won and that Dr. James White lost. But at the same time, they were very critical of my argumentation, at times mocked me and said certain things. And they don't even know me, never even spoke to them before until they did the debate review, which I thought was honestly a bit disrespectful. So I said, you know what, you little punks, bunch of jokers, why don't you actually come on a stream and discuss with me one-on-one? And one of the guys wanted to do a debate. And I said, look, you're a nobody. I debate and I discuss and have interviews with Christian scholars. You think I'm going to debate you? You're nobody. And I've watched 5 minutes of your stuff and you don't know what you're even talking about. You don't know your head from your foot. So I've invited these guys to come on the stream. From Sentinel Apologetics was some guy named Rob and the other guy, Vlad, who appeared in both streams in 2 debate reviews. I invited them both on. Supposedly, they're supposed to come on at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, which would be, what's that, 7:30 p.m. UK time. Let's see if they even show up. I don't know. But we've got almost 200 people here watching. And so far, no Christian Trinitarians calling in. So let me make sure that if you guys can help me out by giving a thumbs up on the stream and sharing it out there, share it on your Twitter, Facebook, invite some of your Trinitarian Christian friends, because otherwise this is going to be a boring stream, guys. I'm just going to be talking about James White and maybe some things potentially looking forward if nobody joins the stream. So I hope that some of these guys will join. I mean, I put the challenge out there. I even commented on their YouTube videos. I said, come on, guys. Just come on, join the stream. I'll take you on one by one and until I get rid of all of you. So the longest I'm going to be on here is until 3:30. So I got about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now, if nobody joins by 2:40 or 2:45, I'll give them a 15-minute cushion. But if none of them join, then I'm just going to leave at a certain point. Well, we've got one person here, Snow Forest. See if this is a Trinitarian. Hello, Snow Forest.
Oh, I'm not actually a Trinitarian. I'm a Unitarian, but I wanted to play devil's advocate for a bit. Or are you only inviting Trinitarians?
I prefer only Trinitarians, but since nobody else since nobody else is here at the moment. Well, we got one other person here.
Oh,
But go
then I'll
ahead.
leave to.
You can make a point if you want, or if you have a comment about the debate or whatever you want to say. But
Well, my point was like in if you take God and then the three persons, and then you distinguish the three persons, or make a distinction between the three persons and God Himself, and merely say that the three persons are ways that God, what was that? Are ways that God interacts with the world, and that these three persons are not necessarily identical to God, meaning that the three persons can be distinct with themselves and distinct with God. Would that make any sense? I can't hear you.
sorry about that. You said that they're not identical to each other, and what was the second point?
If they're not identical to each other and identical to God, and that the three persons are just ways that God interacts with the world.
Yeah, then that would be
And the
then that
title God is merely ideological and not ontological.
it's you said it's ideological.
Yeah, it's just
In
merely
what
a
sense?
title.
In what
Um,
sense?
in the sense, how would I structure this?
Are you basically saying modalism?
Not modalism. The three persons exist individually, distinct from each other, but they're also distinct from God Himself, and that God works through these three persons to interact with the world.
Okay, so then they're not God, because there's God and then there's these three other things.
I don't know. That's the best way I could argue for the Trinity without getting into contradictions. I don't know.
Yeah, but then each of the persons wouldn't be God, because God would be this fourth thing that's then controlling these three other things.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I see your point. Yeah.
But anyway, we have somebody else here waiting. It looks like he's holding up cards. Maybe a total joker here. Let's see what he has to say. If you start with nonsense, I'll just kick you right off the stream right away. So I noticed that you like my name, so you took on my name. Are you going to talk, or are you just going to hold up cards? Okay, so you're not going to unmute your mic and can talk. All right, so you're going to be kicked out. Bye-bye. I don't know who that Looney Tune is, holding up cards, not even saying anything whatsoever. Tried to take on my name, but don't worry, buddy. I got your name, so I know who you are, Adam. Nice try. Okay. Let's see. We had a super sticker from Isa. Let me just see if I can scroll back, and not able to access it, am I? One second here. Don't see it here. But anyway, Isa sent a super sticker, so shout out to Isa. Really appreciate that. We've got Ahmed waiting here. Guys, let's see. Ahmed, you're a Christian, Muslim, what? Can you hear me?
Alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I'm 14 years old Muslim who makes a YouTube channel. He currently I currently make a YouTube channel which spreads Islam, and I need help. Any advice you want to give it to me?
On what specifically?
Like I make an Islamic channel, like I spread Islam.
Do you speak in English on YouTube or something else?
Speak English, both speak and Arabic.
Okay. What topics do you usually talk about?
like I prove that the Quran is the word of God and Muhammad was a prophet and more.
Mashallah. Well, I think that's good. I mean, I don't know what else you're asking for me to tell you other than, I guess, just keep up good work. I haven't seen your YouTube videos, so maybe if you can put a link in the private chat so I can check it out and then maybe give you some
Okay, now I'll show you.
feedback.
Can you wait a minute? I'll show you the.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of people here waiting, and looks like we got a couple Christians. So just put it in the private chat, and then I'll take a look at it when I get the chance.
Yeah, and also, if you don't mind, can you spread it also?
Sure, inshallah. All right, brother.
Okay,
Talk
thank
to you.
you.
Assalamu alaikum. So we've got this same guy here, the guy that just held up cards in the background. I'm sorry, dude, but you're banned from the studio now. You're out of here because you're coming on with my name and you're obviously not me. We'd have a real problem if I was talking to myself. So you're out, dude. Who else do we have here? Oh, we've got Rob. Hello there.
Hey, Jake. How you doing?
I'm good. So for people who don't know, Rob has a YouTube channel. He was one of the people who reviewed my debate with James White. So I invited him and the other fellow on there, Vlad, as well as whoever was on the other stream. Honestly, I don't remember their names.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Vlad's at church. He'll be coming soon. So I thought, because I was just in the background, just hoping that you didn't get discouraged by no one coming in. So I just thought I'll just come in. So
okay. So
what did you think of my review?
I thought it was terrible. So I think that I have a lot more notes on the points that what's his name? Vlad made, which were specifically on my arguments. I think more so your points were when you talked, you were speaking about from a biblical perspective as well as arguments against Tawheed. You guys went through that paper trying to show anthropomorphisms and all that kind of stuff. But you didn't really speak too much about the Trinity and your defense of the Trinity and responding to my objections. That was more so Vlad. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So my profession, I'm in the physics department in astrophysics, and as a Christian, I'm also interested in the theological ancient Near Eastern context of the Bible, and I understand Greco-Roman math and philosophy was basically the forefront of the education of the early church, specifically the patristics. And then, when you in your debate, you mentioned William Lane Craig and you're going into philosophical lingo, that's technically not my profession. My interests lie more so in the text. I'm sort of like a text guy and the theology, and I find the Trinity to make sense in that sense. But I brought on Vlad purely because he also approached me and said, look, I'm also proficient in the philosophical engagement. And it was like a last minute sort of thing. It wasn't some like a heavily planned or designed review. It was sort of like I saw the debate once. There were moments where James White, so in other words, James White is like me, not a philosopher, but I would also propose that James White still failed because he's too trapped in his tradition and in his reformed sort of thinking, because in his thinking he wants to filter the text only through that tradition, whereas I'm more open-minded about the scholarship, like the larger scope of Second Temple scholarship and ancient Near Eastern scholarship.
So what church do you belong to?
I'm a Christian. I attend. So I'm, English Anglican. And so I go. I guess I'm under the Protestant strain, but denominationally, I don't like to put any labels. I am Athanasian affirming, Nicene affirming, but as far as like that would be my Christian creedal statements, belief system sort of thing. But as far as, Pentecostal, Wesleyan, Arminian, Calvinist, I think all of those are models of theology, that there are some truths and some errors in it, because these are just humans making up models to try and explain things.
So what was your problem with what James White said?
The problem. So, for example, his attack against William Lane Craig. Now, I don't endorse everything Craig says, but Craig at the same time is one side of the coin, and I think Vlad, or someone like Vlad, is an example where that's his strengths in that field, which is like William Lane Craig as well and all that. So, but James White, he tends to think that theology trumps everything, and I'm saying, look, even general revelation, like natural theology, like, so I'm in the sciences. I'm an evolutionist. I believe in evolution, for example, Big Bang, all that. Now I know James White would disagree with that. Theologically, I hold to say Michael Heiser's works, Divine Counsel, Ancient Near Eastern stuff, that communicate to us, or gives a type of clarity to certain Old Testament passages, like Psalm 82. James White would disagree with that. So I'm sensitive to White's sensitivity to that stuff, and so his approach to you in the debate, I could see that creeping in. He wouldn't hear you out specifically, but then there were moments in the debate, which you saw in my review, where he would say things about the Quran, which I found quite interesting, with respect to the Quran's understanding of the Trinity, and that's why I gave that middle ground about particularly that dissertation that I was reading from, where I found it interesting that the author of the dissertation was practically giving a very accurate summary of ancient Near Eastern scholarship and Old Testament scholarship about the plurality of God.
Do you think that represents represents mainline traditional Sunni Orthodox?
So I'm not a Muslim. I don't claim any authority or complete knowledge on what goes on in the minds of Muslims, especially
I could tell you it doesn't. That stuff is heresy. We don't believe in anthropomorphism.
But that dissertation was done at Harvard, and I understand.
So, I can find another one done at Harvard that'll say something else. So that's the reality. Doesn't matter where it was done.
Yeah,
you have to look at the tradition and the text and try to be objective. If I were to come with some arguments and representing Christianity by things that Christians don't even believe, that would be dishonest. And that's what I feel that you guys did with this paper, because no Muslim today believes that God is physical, or the descriptions of, oh, he's really like an old man or a young boy, and all this kind of stuff that you're reading. We don't believe that. So it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, if that were presented to me in the debate, I'll just laugh at it. Like, we don't believe that. So what's the point? That's like me presenting some ridiculous thing that you don't believe.
So, but understand why I brought out that paper as well. What we do have in the biblical data, with respect to the biblical data, what we do have, it's as if it was a Christian or someone who well versed in Christian theology prior to all the philosophical musings of the patristics. So first century Jews back with the 2 powers in heaven stuff. And him bridging that and saying, based on these statements that he's found in Islamic literature, Quran, starting with the Quran and then expanding that out, I, as a non-Muslim and a person who doesn't read Arabic, but seeing him transliterate certain terms and translate it for the dissertation committee to review, that I can't help but go, wow, like in Surah 42, it's speaking about the veil. Like things like stuff like that makes me as a Christian go, it's as if it's the Christian theology repackaged in that Quranic Islamic context. That's what I was pointing out. And I was just wondering if Muslims were aware of this, more so than attacking or using that as an attack or like a derogative attack or something like that. Rather, what I'm trying to do is bridge what I found very interesting in that dissertation to say, look, this is what the Christians believe. And is it true then that
I don't even think Christians
that same
believe
theology
that
is the same thing?
I don't even think Christians believe that stuff that you were presenting. I wouldn't even argue that against Christians. So you think when the Bible says that the heavens, and how's it phrased again? It speaks about God having hands, right? And it speaks about God having a face. Do you think that God the Father literally has two physical hands?
You're talking about in Islamic literature?
No, I'm asking in the Old Testament.
You mean two hands, like left and right?
Yeah. Does God have two physical hands?
No.
Okay, so what's
But
meant?
how do you explain? Sorry.
What's meant by that when God speaks like that in the Old Testament?
Yeah. So, for example, Jeremiah 1, you have Jeremiah as being an authenticated prophet, and it says that the word of Yahweh appears to Jeremiah, reaches out with his hand and touches Jeremiah's lips, and then says, "I put my words in your mouth." So when you have anthropomorphisms throughout the Old Testament text, and then you have John 1:18 say, "No one has seen God," what's going on between John's thinking in John 1:18 and those anthropomorphisms that appear in the Old Testament?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, so the explanation then is that the Second Temple Jews will say that these are anthropomorphisms, just like even divine messengers that appear throughout the Old Testament period. There's one particular messenger that happens to be that veil between the God and people. And then that's why John in John 1:18 clarifies and says, yeah, no one has seen God, but the monogenes theos, the unique God at the Father's side, is the one that reveals the invisible deity. Like Colossians 1:15 says, the Son is the image of the invisible God.
Yeah, but does he always those are appearances in the Old Testament. Is he always that way?
No, there's many different ways, and this is why I was reading.
That's my point. He makes appearances. He doesn't have physicality is not inherent to who God is.
But we Christians don't believe that, and I don't.
Well, that's my point. But the way you guys were presenting it was as if that Muslims it wasn't just about God coming down to earth and appearing and things like that. No, it was presented as if God is in the heavens and he's actually looks like a young boy. That's the way it was presented.
Yeah, but that's a misunderstanding of what I'm getting at, or what the scholars of my tradition.
Well, that's the way that you guys presented the Quranic material.
No. So this is why kenosis is important in that fuller Christian expression in the New Testament. That although he is in the form of God, that morphe of God, which is obviously not anthropomorphic, he then becomes anthropomorphic. So you have kenosis of the second, what then the Christians called the second person or the Son of God. In the Old Testament, he's either a burning bush, fiery pillar. Sometimes you have in the creation account the spirit hovering, very localized sort of thing.
Yeah, I understand all that, but you have in, for example, Psalm 19, it talks about the handiwork of God. That's how it's translated, but it's a similar word in Arabic, literally referring to hands. You don't think that God literally has physical hands, do you?
No.
Right. So my point to you is that I think you should be a bit more charitable with how you read and interpret the Islamic texts, other than simply reading things into it that are not really there, that Muslims don't believe.
Yeah, okay, but understand again what I'm trying to say. As a Christian, when I engage with atheists, so when atheists ask me, what is explicit, tangible evidence for God's existence? And as the patristics would argue, like Athanasius beautifully talking about deification and theosis, the reason that the whole Bible messages, the reason why we even exist to begin with, is ultimately God wants to cause a theosis to solve chaos kampf of this reality. And
Yeah,
that
of course,
involves
I
the
don't believe that.
incarnation and the hypostasis of the divine with this reality.
Yeah, you mentioned kenosis. Can you explain what that is?
Kenosis, the emptying.
I know what it is, but can you explain how you understand it? It comes from Philippians 2.
Yeah.
So how do you understand it?
But taking on chaos kampf.
Yes, but my question is, the kenosis, the emptying, what does that actually mean?
Taking on chaos kampf.
Okay, so he didn't lose any divine attributes.
No.
Were they veiled?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was veiled? What divine attributes were veiled?
So in the Christian message is for God to be, to know that He actually exists tangibly with respect to you and I as creatures, because you and I, as Psalm 8 says, we are lesser than the divine. You can only argue for His existence implicitly through creation and so on. And both camps, whether you're Muslim or Christian, you look to the universe and you make these arguments. But for God Himself to do what He does by this language of tabernacling, this descendance down, what I find interesting is Philippians 2 is basically communicating the full expression of that kenosis, even below the so-called angelic context. And the Second Temple Jews and the patristics would say, how does God, isn't it like an infinite regress that God, if He's so other and the seraphim are having to not, they can't even behold His face and His glory, right? But how are they still able to approach Him even in a type of conversation? Because forever it's a infinite regress forever to try and communicate to Him and get to Him.
Yeah, Rob, I don't want to cut you off, but this stream is supposed to be about the Trinity and maybe some things relevant to what you said.
Yeah, I'm not even, my approach is just to have a conversation. I don't play games of trying to, like, this is some boxing match or something. I'm actually here for a genuine discussion. And I'm talking about my reading in regards to the historical context and the theology that I find quite beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm saying you're trying to then bridge the gap and use the Quran, and I'm rejecting all that. So there's no point of continuing to talk in that line, because you're not going to get me or any other Muslim to believe that God is physical. So
my approach is not even to get you to do any of that. But what I'm trying to say is, ultimately, the goal is, in that evangelistic sense, to say a non-believer. It doesn't have to be Christian or Muslim. I'm talking about, say, the atheists out there as well. The model I'm proposing shows God being tangible because of this act that takes place in Christ. And ultimately, what kind of blows my mind is the Quran doesn't explain what the Injil actually is. Because when I see the Bible story, well, okay, then when I explain what the gospel is, tell me if this is what the Quran says. So yes, it's all about the sin stuff, but it's more so than that. It's all to do with theosis. It's all to do with glorification and a triumphism over chaos kampf.
No, we're not interested in theosis. So listen, what I'm saying is maybe you misunderstood what the stream was about, or my invitation. Okay. You guys made a review critiquing my debate with James White, which was on the Trinity and Tawhid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you don't want to offer, because let me ask you this, who do you think won the debate?
I don't think neither of you won the debate, to be honest.
So so at least you don't think that James White did a very good job either attacking my position, defending the Trinity, or both. But yet you were critiquing me. I didn't really hear that much critique of James White. So if you could do a better job, I would like you, and if you don't want to, we can move to somebody else to actually defend the Trinity.
Yeah, so I can point out that the Trinity, as defined in the Old Testament, is more so to do with the two powers in heaven motif, a sort of binatarian sense that the Holy Spirit as a third person does lurk around in various passages. And then that coincides very interestingly with the anthropological data of the human psyche through evolution. Because when you look at human migration patterns and the spirituality of humans from Africa into the Persian Gulf and then the spreading out, and so what you're doing is you're doing a comparative context with respect to ancient Near Eastern religions and the Old Testament religion. You find a pattern of a type of polytheism that's wrestling with the monotheism of the Old Testament prophets. And that being said, there's what's called a polemic that's always at play. By the time you reach Jesus, the full expression of the Trinity is under a Pythagorean model. So this is why I find it interesting that when Muslims, from an Arabic number system looking back, they go, oh, 1 + 1 + 1 doesn't equal 1, it equals 3. But that's an anachronism, whereas the Pythagorean number system actually works. For example, the triangle, the equilateral triangle, the patristics were quite familiar with. And that's how they would approach the topic using the New Testament as a backing, Father, Son, Spirit as defined in that passage there.
Okay, so again, I'm honestly not interested in any of that whatsoever. I couldn't care less.
But those are all the valid data points as to why I hold to the Trinity, because that is the meat.
Yeah, to me, if you tell me, hey, these are all the reasons why I believe there's a square circle, I'm not. Everything else that comes before it, I don't care. You have to justify the existence of the square circle or explain how it's actually not a square circle, and then I can listen to the other stuff.
How could you jump to a square circle when I'm talking about Pythagorean triples and the...
That's my point. So now we need to get what your actual position is.
You know what a Pythagorean triple is?
We need to actually get your position on the Trinity, because that's what this is what the stream is about. I don't care about all the historical stuff that you're going through and the two powers in the Old Testament and then all the verses in the New Testament that say Jesus is God and all. I don't care about any of that. So
why not?
I mean, because of what I just said, if you are inviting me to something that I think is a square circle, I don't care about anything you say to describe the square circle. I don't care if it's blue. I don't care. Because I've studied the Trinity enough to know that no matter what you say, there's a problem with it. So that's why the philosophical stuff is important to me. And James White, unfortunately, he couldn't address any of the points. Hold on a second. I suspect that you couldn't address any of them either.
Is the Banach-Tarski paradox a square circle?
Listen, Rob, if you're coming on here, to actually have a discussion, then we can talk. But this is my stream. This is what I'm telling you that I'm here to discuss. Now, you guys criticized my arguments against the Trinity, and yet now you're trying to have an entirely different discussion about the number 3 and how it was used in ancient Greece and all that. I don't care about that. I couldn't care less.
But isn't that the perspicuity context of the early Christians and why they wrote what they wrote with respect to their
I
theology?
don't care if you are inviting me to something that I think is a square circle. I don't give a damn. I don't care what you say.
So you don't care about the context of the first century thinkers?
No, I do not. I do not care about what you claim it is, because as long as it entails what I think is a contradiction or is false, then I know that what leads me there necessarily is problematic.
Okay, so then when I gave an example in my review about, say, the Banach-Tarski paradox in mathematics, is that because it's non-intuitive, it's totally...
First of all, I didn't even watch your whole review. It was over 3 hours. I watched a good portion of it, and I also watched the other review as well.
Okay, I'll quickly just say what it is. 1 + 1 = 1 in the Banach-Tarski paradox.
I'm telling you, I don't care.
But it's a modern mathematical concept in pure mathematics.
If you're trying to use mathematics to prove the Trinity is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
No, I wasn't doing that. In the review, in the debate review, I was bringing up analogies with respect to our intuition about reality, and I was just saying, look, because I'm in that field. That's my expertise is in that field. Vlad is, and yourself, you're in the philosophical field. So, as a scientist, I'm telling you that as the history of science has demonstrated, when certain phenomena take place, and we try and understand that phenomena, and then mathematics is practically the main tool by which we try and measure that phenomena, the more we learn about the world, the more paradoxical it appears.
All right. So what you're doing is you're trying to bring what you think is a mathematical paradox to then explain the legitimacy of an apparent contradiction. That's basically what you're trying to do. Let's just dumb this down for everybody.
What I'm saying is, you should not be jumping to the conclusion and saying the Trinity is wrong or contradictory.
Rob, I think I've done more research on the Trinity than you have in this respect, and I have enough knowledge to actually know that, first of all, you don't know what you're talking about, and second of all, that I do think that most positions either result in a contradiction or heresy. So which one are you going to follow?
Okay, so then my question to you is, does the Old Testament communicate a Trinity?
I don't care.
No. I'm asking about the data.
I don't care about it. I don't care about it. That's what you don't get.
I know you don't care about it, but does the Old Testament communicate a two powers in heaven theology?
I don't care.
So you don't know, you don't care.
I don't care. That's the point. I'm telling you I don't care, and you keep trying to get me to have that conversation, which I don't care about. So you're wasting your time, buddy.
No. I mean, what's the implications? What are the implications if the Old Testament does teach two powers in heaven?
Absolutely nothing. Nothing to me. Absolutely nothing.
No, to Christians.
I don't care. I don't care what the implications are for you.
To be honest,
I don't view the Bible as an authority. You view the Bible.
It has nothing to do with
it does. You view the Bible as an authority, and I'm trying to tell you that I don't care about it. So you're going to give me your reasons for why you believe in the Trinity, and I'm giving you my reasons why, no matter what you say, unless you answer to my reasons, I don't care about it.
Yeah, so why do you think I believe in the Trinity?
Well, you've just been going over it. You think that it's in the Old Testament text. You think that it's in the New Testament text. You're talking about mathematics and paradoxes and a number 3 and its significance in amongst the ancient peoples, all that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand everything you're saying, but I don't care about it. It's irrelevant to me. I'm asking you, if you can't even tell me what the sentence "the Father is God" means, just like James White couldn't, then your whole thing is gone. It's gone. You can't even tell me what the sentence means.
Yeah, that's Christian lingo. That's first century Christian lingo, where the expression is on the lips of Jesus according to the New Testament.
Okay, so what does the statement "the Father is God" means? Is it identification? Is it an identity statement or predication? Or are you going to tell me, just like I told you, that it's irrelevant? And if that's the case, then we both think each other's thoughts are irrelevant, and then we could say, have a nice day.
I would say, according to that statement, ontologically, you have theos, this particular deity, and being expressed in three persons: Father, Son, Spirit.
Okay, so you just did the exact same thing that James White did. You answered the question without actually answering it. You never actually answered whether or not, when I say the Father is God, is the Father identical to God, or is God a predication of the subject that is the Father? Which one is it? Now, do you need me to explain to you what the difference between the two are?
Go for it. Explain the difference.
Okay, so when I say that Superman is Clark Kent, what does that mean?
You're saying that the actual being Superman, which is actually who he is taking on the persona of Clark Kent.
Are they literally the same thing?
But they are the same thing.
Yeah, so they're identical to each other. They're two names that refer to the same thing. Now, when I say Superman is strong, is functioning the same in both sentences?
He's, strong. Strength is not a person. It's
so
just
is he identical? Is it identical to strong?
Well, you're basically saying you're giving him a characteristic that he's strong.
Okay, so are those two statements and how is functioning in the sentence, do they have a different meaning?
Yeah.
Okay, so now when we take the Father is God and those two ways that we just talked about Superman, is it more like Superman is Clark Kent, the Father is God, meaning he's identical to God? Or is it more like Superman is strong, the Father is God, meaning he has this predicate or property or set of properties of divinity that are predicated of him? Which one is it?
It would be the predicate.
Okay, it would be the predicate. Now, would you say that the exact same thing follows for the Son and the Holy Spirit in the same way?
Yeah.
So each person, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, each have this thing that is divinity. Whatever it takes to be God, each one of them fully possess that. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so how do you not have three gods?
Because they're all in that one theos, according to Christian theology.
Okay, so what makes them one? What is the principle that makes them one God versus three gods?
The fact that so I'll give you an example from Scripture, because this is the data point. This is the Second Temple discussion. So Proverbs 8 was verse 22 onwards was a debated in the sense of how to make sense of it in Second Temple literature, and Philo brings this out, where the wisdom element of God happens to be a deuterotheos, the second theos. And in other words, how they were describing it is, here's God. So think Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God. But then when you start to, as you keep reading through the passage, when it starts speaking about then the Spirit of God, and then God speaking, the memra, the logos of God, saying, let there be. So if the wisdom element of God is also eternal, as Proverbs 8 says it is, now you have two eternal entities, so to speak, but they are one and the same being at the same time. And so in other words, hypostasis also exists then within the Godhead. And this is how the two powers theology worked with that you have the invisible Yahweh and then the visible Yahweh in hypostasis.
So you think that they're the same God?
Yes, so they embody the same nature.
Okay,
but
so
now at least you have two in that sense, according to Proverbs 8.
So they embody. So what makes them one is the fact that they all have the same divine nature.
Yes, they're within the same, whatever that is. But just with that simple analogy of here's God, and then he has a thought. Now notice he has a thought. That sounds like it's speaking in time, but obviously God's not subject to time.
He's not?
No.
Okay.
Like,
So when
so if he has a thought, like I'm speaking as a finite being using anthropomorphisms, and this is again part of the Second Temple discussion, that God and then the wisdom element, if he's thinking in time, then he's a finite being, he's not eternal. But because he's eternal, now the wisdom element is eternal, and now you have God and the wisdom part, both eternal, two things, but at the same time they're one. So it's two in one. So this is why you have binitarianism before Trinitarianism.
So again, back to the main issue. What makes them one, supposedly, is that they have the same divine nature. Now we have three things. Okay, we have the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, each fully possessing the divine nature. So whatever makes God God, each one of these three things fully possess it. That flat out results in three gods. There's no way around it.
But how is that the case when you have that same imagery in the ancient Near Eastern context with Baal and El? You have that same hierarchy.
How does that relate to this conversation?
Because I'm talking Old Testament here first, and the Old Testament.
It doesn't matter. That's my point. It doesn't matter if the Old Testament or some ancient near whatever had this conception, and they said that there was one God. It doesn't matter. We're asking whether or not it makes any sense. If you have three things that each possess what it means to be fully God, then you have three gods. Plain and simple.
Okay. To put it another way, in Exodus 3, when God says, "I am that I am," that
it's
is
actually not the correct translation, but go ahead.
Okay, that word Yahweh in the third person, Yahweh.
Yeah.
So
scholars actually say that it's probably better translated as "I will be what I will be."
Yeah, I understand that, and you can have it as Yahweh or Yahweh, and you can change the E to an I. And because it's all to do with that he's always been and he will always cause to be and all that stuff. But the point is, especially in that context with respect to Egypt, you have all the other ancient Near Eastern gods that are subordinate to, in their mythology, the primordial waters and this reality. Whereas the God of the Old Testament is unique out of all the ancient Near Eastern literature in basically communicating a transcendence. This is again going to Proverbs 8, where we can't speak of God in time and having thoughts in time. He's simultaneously eternal. Here's where I was going with this, though. When you then speak about him having, I don't know, parts and how can these three be in one and so on, notice you're putting God into a dimensional box within our reality. That's what I'm getting at.
So God is beyond our reality, meaning when it comes to this discussion, he's beyond reason.
Yes.
Okay.
So in that debate review, when I spoke about
God is literally beyond reason.
Yes.
In the sense that we're discussing now of how God can be one God, and yet we have these three things that each fully possess the divine nature. We can never understand how that actually works.
So I'm of the opinion that the Trinity is the simplest way God can communicate who he is in its fullest expression. The Trinity is like the most naked, so to speak, God can make himself, the most transparent he can make himself. Just in my debate review, when I used the Flatlander analogy, the difference between the Flatlanders and my three-dimensional finger is a one-dimensional difference.
Yeah, I understand Flatland. I've read it.
In that analogy, when I stuck my finger in, the cross-section of my finger was a circle. And according to the Flatlanders' perception, that one-dimensional difference would make them go, "Oh, Rob is a circle."
Yeah. But so then you're saying that the problem is not an ontological problem. You're saying that it's an epistemic problem. Is that correct? Or in reality, even in and of itself, that it is beyond logic, meaning it's beyond the classical logical categories.
Yeah, just like how, again, using hints in mathematics, when we then peer into nature, like Romans 1:20 says, through nature we can have some grasp of his divine attributes. Okay, Paul, let's put that to the test. the more we look at nature, the more paradoxical nature looks in mathematics and physics.
Yeah.
And then to me as a scientist, I can say, wow, as if there is a creator of this reality, it not only is it a beautiful reality, then how much more grander is than God, the creator who's created this. And therefore, when I see these things take place in the literature of that ancient past, I can't help but smile and think to myself, these are very sophisticated thinkers and writers. This is why the patristics and Athanasius talking about the hypostasis, kenosis, theosis,
Yeah, but when you say to me that God is beyond reason, beyond logic, that's it. I check out. Have a nice day. I'm not interested.
But
I'm not saying that literally that you have to leave the stream, but I'm simply saying to you that that's my position, because literally to say that something is beyond logic is nonsense, because then I can't understand it whatsoever. It's literally nonsense. And the fact that you're even saying that, which is interesting because Christ himself is supposedly the Logos, which is where we get logic from. Mm-hmm. And yet you're saying that the Logos is beyond logic is absurd. It doesn't make any sense. How could the Logos, which is the foundation for logic itself, be beyond Logos?
So you mean to... Okay, do you know about Gödel's incompleteness theorem?
Yeah, I do.
What is it?
It's a mathematical... basically, what he says is that you cannot, as far as I understand it, and I'm not a mathematician, but as far as I understand it, that you cannot, without presuppositions or assuming certain things, you cannot have a fully, how would you say it? Basically, from within the system itself, you cannot derive the things that you need in order to get what you actually want to get out of it. You actually need to assume things. Mm-hmm. That's basically the way that I understand it.
So you can't prove facts. Just to cut to
in the mathematical realm, that's how I understand the incompleteness theorem.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. And Wigner's paper in the 50s, when he spoke about the amazing connection between mathematics and the physical reality, that there's somehow an applicability. And so.
Yeah, but I don't see it that way, because
there's an example.
I don't have a problem with
an example where logicians. Well, I'll just say that there are logicians who are theists, who will then communicate that here are hints in mathematics that showcase we cannot know the mind of God, and therefore it's beyond our comprehension.
I don't think so. I don't think that's not my conclusion from incompleteness theorem.
Because if we could, the thing is, if we could do that,
can I disprove hard solipsism in a rigorous philosophical manner? No, I can't. But what that tells me is that there are certain things in epistemology that we need to take as foundational in order to make sense of everything else. Because we cannot escape our reality to look back on it to say, is this the way that it really is? We can't do that. But the whole point is that does not follow from that then therefore that my experience that I should actually doubt it. No, this is how I can reason and relate to the system that I'm in. I cannot escape that. And so to say or even make a claim that something does not follow, for example, the law of non-contradiction or classical identity or excluded middle, if it doesn't follow these things and God is literally beyond that, then we can be at an intellectual stalemate. Because anything that you say about God and I raise a problem about it, you say, oh, well, God is beyond reason, Jake. And then you do the same with me. And I say, well, Rob, God is beyond reason. So what?
Yeah.
And then where do we go?
What if he's that's the point, though. If he's beyond reason, how does he demonstrate himself, though?
That's the point. He's not beyond reason. He's not.
So you can understand Allah then completely.
No, it's not that you understand him in terms of
Or
full
comprehend.
comprehension. No, it's not that you fully understand him in terms of in a comprehensive manner, but what you do know about God and what he reveals about himself does not lead to or entail contradictions. There's a radical difference between those two propositions. There's a difference between being presented with an apparent contradiction and saying, well, I have no answer to it, and something that we just say, well, how exactly did God do X? Or what is God's eternity really like? Or there's nothing inherently contradictory about it. It's just something that maybe is sort of we cannot fully comprehend because we don't have the first person perspective of God. But there's nothing that's contradictory about it that makes us second guess and say, oh no, this might be a problem. So those are two different things.
Yeah. So what about then the discussions that have taken place well before, up until Islam, with respect to the Trinity? Do you just discount those data points because, like you said a moment ago, you just don't care?
Which discussions?
All the way from Old Testament, ancient Near East, Old Testament, right through the Second Temple, New Testament, patristic writers, and then Quran in the 7th century. Like,
of what about how people believed in the Trinity and
no, just God.
Yeah, about God.
Like
yes.
And how did God reveal himself through the generations in these finite? Like Hebrews 1 literally says, God, in past times, in fragmentary forms, he's shown himself by various means, but then now has fully expressed himself through the Son. That's a claim.
Yeah, but the point is, logic is something that there's no doubt about, okay? Historical facts and doing these historical investigation that you're doing, I'm not saying that people shouldn't do it or that they shouldn't look into it, but no, what I'm saying is these historical counts, for the most part, are probabilistic, especially when we're talking about ancient history. Mm-hmm. And we can't just act as if we can be certain about these things. No, but what I can be certain about, and as certain as I possibly can be, is that I don't believe that square circles or married bachelors exist. And if they do, then yeah, I'm going to have a big problem. So I look at any historical evidence and look at what it entails in light of that fact. And if I say, well, I have these data points from history and they lead me to an absurdity, then I say, oh, maybe there's something wrong with those data points that I need to second guess. So that's where I'm at.
So then what's absurd about, say, the two powers concept in the Old Testament?
What's absurd is saying that there are three persons that are each fully God in the unique way, and yet there's only one God. Yes, that is absurd.
So they're each fully, let's just use the word strong to go along with that predicate argumentation you made. So each are fully strong.
Yeah, you have three things that are strong. You have three things that are strong. You don't have one Superman or one strong person.
So imagine, let's go along with the Superman picture here. So we have three Supermen, and they're strong, and yet they're the one Superman.
Yeah, that's the absurdity. You said we have three Supermen, but yet it's one Superman.
Yeah,
that's the whole point.
Yeah,
it's a contradiction to say there's three Supermen, yet there's one Superman. No, then I check out and I say.
So why is that a contradiction?
To say that there are three Supermen and there's really only one Superman, yes, that's a contradiction.
Yes, so I agree with you on that. I agree. It's a contradiction. That's basically what you just said. But why?
Because 3 and 1 are different.
Speak to me in the physics context. Because speak to me in physics terms or like physics characteristics or ontologies.
Yeah, three things are different than one thing, and to say that there's three of the one thing and yet it's only one thing in the same way is a contradiction. Now, if you wanted to say, well, it's three in one way and one in a different way, like my microphone, I can have one microphone that has three different parts. That I can understand. But to say that you have three microphones but really only one microphone, then no, that's a contradiction.
Is there a is there a difference between the microphone and those three supermen claiming to be one Superman? Is there a difference?
Because in this case, in the microphone, we at least have one microphone. In the Superman case, we have three Superman that are before us, and they're saying, "Hey, we're only one."
I agree with you. I agree. So you and I are spectators. Microphone, three Supermen claiming to be one Superman. What is common between the two?
What's common? They're both claiming to be Superman, but one is saying three and the other is one. That's the commonality.
Well,
you have Superman in both. It's just, is there one or three?
So what's going in my mind in this discussion, which I don't think is going through your mind? What's going through my mind is I'm thinking in the abstract physical context of dimensional ontology here. Both the reason why I would agree with you that the three Supermen can't be the one Superman is because ontologically, I can actually put them under an hourglass and be like, no, you are an individual with your own DNA and blah, 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 blah. You're not somehow, it's not like Doctor Strange where he creates multiples of him, but it's just like a mirage and then he snaps into his one self. It's not like that. They're constrained to the 10 dimensions of this flat geometry of this universe. 3 spatial, 4th is time, and 6 in the quantum level. So God who, again, going back to the Exodus 3 context, God who, when he says I am, it's a declaration to say the Egyptian gods are not transcendent. I'm the only transcendent one. If he's outside the system, he's not constrained to dimensional limits that will then cause the 3 Supermen to be, that they can't be 3 and 1 at the same time.
So he's not constrained to classical logic.
He's not constrained to the perceptions of reality that you and I perceive reality to be.
Yes, but then this is when we go back to the point. Is it a problem? Is it an epistemic problem or is it an ontological problem? Those are two different things.
So the same thing applies in astrophysics with respect to what happens before the Planck epoch in the Big Bang. What is going on before the universe starts? That's a huge conundrum. Mathematically, we can't solve it. No matter all the hundreds of quantum gravity models that's been proposed, we just don't know what on earth is going on before the Big Bang because everything breaks down. Dimensions snap to a singularity. Energies are practically at infinite. And whatever, if there is a creator or some sort of pre-existent entity that is a causal agent for this, you can't then define the ontological parameters of this being.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've reached a wall here. There's a bunch of other people waiting.
In closing, I'll just say the Christian model gives complete logical sense in this sense to say that since God enters into creation and tangibly says, I am God incarnate.
Yeah, I do want to make one point about that. Go ahead. But I want to address one last point.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So then I can turn to the atheist and say, yeah, the person of Jesus is God in flesh, and therefore you have no excuse. Whereas if you claim that God doesn't tabernacle or doesn't appear tangibly, like the way the Christian message claims he did, then by best, you can only argue for God's existence implicitly, and it's just by the word of mouth of prophets, and that's it.
Okay, so you said earlier that you don't think that God is in time. Is that right? You don't think he's subject to time?
He's not. Yeah, he's not subject to aeon or time. Yeah.
Okay.
As Augustine put it.
How do you understand time in relation to that context? When you say God is not subject to time, what do you mean by that? What is time in that respect?
So time is intertwined with the entropy, thermodynamic properties, the arrow of time. That's how I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking of this in more physics terms, where and I hold to the I'm a B theorist, but at the same time, if God is transcendent to the system, I as a theist, and I propose this to other physicists, that maybe there's like a G time, a non-Euclidean time, because if God is able to access past, present, future, time in this sense is a non-Euclidean sort of shape mathematically.
So doesn't the Bible present a God that does different things at different times? Isn't that the natural reading of the text?
Yeah. And
okay,
you can have stretching of time, contraction of time, days like 1,000 years.
So in John 1:1, when it says the Word became flesh, isn't that temporal?
Yeah, he's entering into the system.
Yeah, so he's entering into time. So he's subject to time. Unless you want to tell me that you believe that the Son eternally possessed a human nature. Do you think that?
No.
Okay, so then the Son, who's eternal, second person of the Trinity, went from not having a human nature to having a human nature.
Mm-hmm.
That necessarily entails that he entered into time and was subject to time.
So, but don't forget, John clarifies the simultaneous context of the incarnation in John 3. If you go to verse 13, let me bring it up. This is the clarification of the simultaneous existence of the Son. In John 3:13, he says, "No one has gone up to heaven except the one who came down from heaven." That's a quote from Proverbs 30 it's a direct quote from Proverbs 30, verse 4. The Son of Man who is in heaven. So in John 3:13, he's basically saying the Son of Man figure in the Old Testament that rides the clouds, the cloud rider, again, theophany language, deity language, only Yahweh is the cloud rider. So the second power, who's the Son of Man in the Old Testament, simultaneously he's in heaven, but at the same time now, again, to use Philippians 2 language, he's
and that goes for every single action that God has ever performed, every state of affairs.
Yeah, so because you have tabernacling of God in the Old Testament.
He's doing everything simultaneously.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then in a B theory, on a B theory theoretical model, you're saying that all of that, everything that God has done, is doing, there's no difference between them. He's just doing them all at once and forever.
No, not in a B theory, more and a more expanded A plus B into a G being God sort of model.
Yeah, but I'm talking about God and his actions. Is he doing everything at the same time?
If you were to see time, the block of time in a non-Euclidean sense, then yes. Like imagine time as equator of a circle. God is, say, the pole. Simultaneously, he's able to affect and interact with the start of the universe and the end of the universe if he needs to.
So is God right now, the Son, is he still dying on the cross?
Yeah. Potentially in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So God, the Son, has been dying on the cross from eternity past, and he will be everlastingly into the future.
No. As far as the existence of the universe is concerned. So
okay,
again,
so then he's in time, because then he went from not dying on the cross to dying on the cross. That necessitates a change, which puts him in time.
So when the universe comes into existence, in the New Testament, you have language like he's planned this before the foundations of the world, or in Revelation 13, the Lamb of God who's been slain as if before the foundation of the world. So you have the actual act in human history.
Yeah.
Which ironically then goes to show if God already has this plan all laid out, and hence the simultaneous nature about it, right? That means regardless of who you are in this world or when you're positioned in the timeline of this world, it's a given fact that God, and in this case a triune God according to this model, is doing this very act of salvation, meaning the cross, atonement.
Yeah, but he didn't do that eternally, though. He didn't do that eternally. It was from the moment which he created going forward. Now he's engaging everything in that timeline all at once. But he still, even if we back it up to that point, he still went from not creating to creating, meaning there was a state of affairs in which God existed alone by himself. He then created the block of time, which means the state of affair changed from God existing alone by himself to now existing and interacting with the block of time. Therefore, he's still changed and he's still in time.
But how is he changing when he's
He went from not creating to creating.
Isn't that the same thing in Islamic theology?
But that's the point. You're denying that God actually is in time and that he changes. And I'm showing you that on your own position, I'm doing an internal critique here. On your own position, how could you possibly say that God didn't change in any way in terms of going from not creating to creating? And now you're telling me that you still don't think that he did. Which then, at that point, I have no idea by what you mean by time and change, because to me, that seems obviously the case based on your position.
How is that a change when I just said, like John clarifies in John 3:13, that by implication, even though he's here on earth,
think about the block of time.
He's still in heaven.
Think about the block of time. We have the block of time and we have God. Is there a state of affairs in which God exists without the block of time?
According to the Bible, yes.
Right, according to the Bible, but according to B theory, actually, in a truly B theoretical model, it would be God alongside the block of time. Eternally, because it's eternalism. That's the whole point. Now, the fact is, if the eternal block or the block that's not eternal, that has a beginning, then there's a state of affairs which God exists alone by himself. He then creates the block of time, which shows at minimum a relational change, because now he's interacting into the block in which he was not in eternity past. So that necessitates a change in being in time.
When he interacts with the block of time, is he leaving his oikoterion, his heavenly dwelling?
He now has succession in his life, meaning that he didn't know eternally that he was in the block of time when he wasn't, because that would be false. How could he know that he's in the block of time when he's not in the block of time because it's not created yet?
But if you're talking about, because when you said they're parallel, and I've given illustrations like this before where, you can make mathematical models of how prayer works and all that. So you have the universe's timeline, an arrow. It's finite, all right? Because the universe is finite.
Well, I believe that, yes.
Yes. Do you hold to Big Bang and evolution and stuff like that?
I hold to Big Bang, yes. I believe that the universe is finite, yes.
Okay. So here's the arrow of time. It's unidirectional. And B theory works with it perfectly. That's relatively. So here's God. Now, God is not here technically. He is everywhere. Because if you hold to the four-dimensional space-time fabric of the universe in its expansion sense, but then the universe itself is at least 10 dimensions, that means God, a 11th dimensional brain and beyond.
Yeah, but Rob, what you're saying is in order
he's everywhere.
Yeah, but in order to say that, when you have the block, in order for God to be everywhere, including around the block has to be there. Otherwise, that statement itself does not make any sense, which is why you either have to predicate and say that you either have to say that the block is eternal, and then that could make sense, or say no, that the block is not eternal. But either way, you're going to have a problem, because if you say it's an eternal block, then there's something that's outside of God that is eternal alongside him. If you say that the block is not eternal, then you necessarily have a change from being without the block to with the block. That's your dilemma.
Okay, perfect. What you just explained there is what I try and then explain to atheists.
Well, anyway, Rob, I don't want to cut you off. You can make your final statement, and then we got to move on. Because
my final statement, then, based on what you just said, is precisely the logic of the incarnation and the resurrection.
Okay,
because the block can't be eternal, by definition, then it is filled with chaos conf, and it is finite and tangible to entropy. It's not him by definition ontologically. It's not God. It's not perfect. But the Christian message is that God wants to not only have a relationship in its fullness sense with you and me, but to, hence this thing called theosis, to glorify the system so that the block vanishes. Because as Revelation 21 communicates, and this is my ending point, it's now an incarnation into God because of what Jesus has done by his hypostasis with the creation.
Okay, well, thank you for joining, Rob. I'm going to definitely have to go to the next guest now, which is your other friend here, Vlad. So, Vlad, if you're listening, please be ready. But take care, Rob. Maybe we'll speak again next time. Yeah, he's here.
Okay.
Hello, boys.
Hey, Vlad. Good to see you.
What's up? Good to see you too, Rob.
Yeah,
I'm here to have some fun with our friend Jake.
Yeah. So, Rob, I don't want to have to kick you out.
If you want, I don't mind.
Yeah, but I think it's better to have one-on-one because otherwise I'm going to go back to your discussion and I want to keep it one-on-one. So, I mean, you can wait in the background if you want, but I'm going to go to Vlad. So, take care. Now, Mr. Vlad, Jake. I've been waiting for you, man. You got out of church. I guess you're ready to go. So, I don't know how much of you were listening to the discussion with Rob, but I think that's an entirely different discussion than what I'm going to have for you because you were the main person in that debate review. So, for those who don't know, Mr. Vlad here did a debate review of twice on two different streams, actually, but I'm going to focus primarily on the one with Rob, especially because we just had him here. Review on my debate with James White. A lot of things were said, a lot of claims, same thing that I'm getting from certain other people that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not well read on the literature. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this to the test. We're going to see who's actually well read on the literature. And I want to address what you said about my presentation and my arguments because Rob was not the main person that actually critiqued my arguments. It was mainly you. And you had a few points about them. So I've taken some notes. Notes and jotted them down.
Yeah, so just to outline what I'm here to discuss, Jake. I'm here to discuss your opening statement within James's debate and my response to it. Yeah, and I'm going to defend the Trinity against any sort of an attack, logical or otherwise, that you might have, which is what I'm interested in here. Yeah. If you want a knowledge measuring context, I have challenged you to a formal debate. This, however, I'm going to keep limited.
But I'm going to show that in about probably, I'll give you 20 minutes max. It's going to be clear that you're not worthy of a formal debate. So let's put that to the test. Now, are you a William Lane Craig fanboy? Would you consider that?
Fanboy? No, but somebody who respects Craig, yes.
Okay. Do you agree with his position on the Trinity?
Yes, I do hold to Trinity monotheism, and I'm very interested to see your attacks thereon.
Yeah, and so do you agree with what he said in his article regarding the Trinity?
Yes, in regards to the article about Trinity monotheism, and in regards to, I'm looking right now at the section about femininity and skeletons and your misrepresentation within the debate with James White.
I didn't misrepresent it, but we're gonna get to that point. We're gonna get to that point because, and what I'll do is if I have to, actually, where's my phone? If I have to, I can, because if you don't actually recall. And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You might not recall exactly what you said, or it may be the case that I don't know. Well, let's find out. So
sure, let's go on.
One of the things that you mentioned was that I actually misrepresented the issue on aseity. So for those who don't know or don't remember, I'll just briefly explain what the argument was. The argument is that the Nicene Creed results in a lack of equality amongst the persons because it results in the Father being ase, or without a cause, and the Son and the Spirit being caused. You gave a response to that and said, well, no, actually it doesn't matter because if it's eternal and it's without time, then it doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine.
That's one part of my response.
Yeah, so that was one part of your response, correct?
Yes. And the other part was about internal versus external causation.
Okay. So now what we're going to do here, I'm going to share my screen since you love William Lane Craig. And if you actually read his material, and maybe you disagree with him, but he disagrees with what you just said.
Before you go on, I want to make it clear to you that when I say I hold to Trinity monotheism, I do not hold to eternal generation. And I'm well aware of Craig's views on
what's Craig's view? You tell me Craig's
in regards
view.
to the Son. Well, Craig believes that in regards to Logos Christology and some of the early Christian creeds, they introduce an unnecessary amount of subordinationism within the Trinity. Therefore, it is the case that Craig views these as appendages of earlier Greek philosophies and doesn't see them as necessarily present within the New Testament. As such, Craig doesn't hold to things like eternal generation of the Son, given that they are appendages, and would say that they imply, given the lack of Son's aseity, some sort of subordinationism within the Trinity, which is not necessary given the language of the New Testament as he interprets it. Would that be correct?
Yeah, somewhat, but that's not the full picture, because it's not just merely that it's not found in the text of Scripture. What else does he have a problem with?
That's the main point.
So you think
maybe.
So you think the main point is that it's not found in the text of Scripture, that in terms of the concept itself, he doesn't have a problem with it.
No, I told you, he has an issue with it not being found in Scripture, and he has an issue with its subordinationism. He has a view that aseity is necessary to the Son. So Craig would hold a slightly different position to mine in that regard, in his criticism of other positions, in that he would say that aseity, if one does not hold to aseity, it is an issue in regards to the deity of the Son.
Okay, so you don't think that the Son needs aseity in order to be God?
I do believe that the Son has aseity, but I don't believe that your arguments show that he doesn't
that's not what I asked. I didn't ask if you think the Son has aseity. I said, and for the sake of argument, if somebody believes that he's not ase, if he does not possess aseity, do you have a problem with that?
No, I don't think that disqualifies him from being God.
Okay, so then you don't think that aseity is a necessary attribute of God?
No, I do think aseity is a necessary attribute of God in the sense of identity. So if we take the Trinity, what is God? God is the Trinity in the sense of identity. It is necessary that the Trinity has aseity. However, if there are internal causationary processes within the Trinity, such as one from the Father to the Son, moreover, if they occur atemporally, I don't see them as an issue in a traditional sense of aseity. The reason why we have aseity as a criteria for that which God is because we don't want God to be created by someone or something or caused or whatever. If this is a process within God, we don't have such issues.
Yes, you do have such issues because it's a distinction. There's a distinction between the persons, and what aseity means is to have existence in and of oneself.
Yes.
Oneself is in relation to a person. So if another person causes you to exist, then you do not have aseity.
I agree with you. Yes, I agree with you. The Son, as a person, under the conception of eternal generation, would not have aseity. My point is that it doesn't create an issue. The only necessary thing that needs to have aseity is God as the sense of identity. The Trinity has to be ase. The Trinity cannot have an external cause. But if there are causes within the Trinity, you have made no argument which would show that the Son needs aseity in order to be God. If you have that argument, go forth and present it right now.
Yes, I do, but I'm trying to pin down what your actual position is. And the second point, which I mentioned earlier, is that you said as long as it's an eternal process, then that's fine. It doesn't matter. That's what you said. You said that as long as it's eternal and not temporal. Now, did I ever argue that it was temporal?
No, my point is, if the process is eternal, so obviously there's a distinction between necessity and aseity, but suppose we are thinking of aseity in terms of eternal generation, if the process is eternal, the reason, as I said previously, why philosophers have issue with God not being ase is because we don't want God to be created or caused by some external force. If this is internal to God, there is no such thing as external causation. And therefore, you need to present an issue. The person.
It's external to the person. And the question is, can something be eternal and be not ase? Forget about God. Forget about, okay. So you can have something that is eternal and not ase. So that shows that eternality is not a sufficient condition for aseity. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree with you.
Okay, so then what's your point of saying that if it's eternal, then it's fine? As long as it's eternal, then it's fine.
Okay, so why do you think aseity is a necessary property of deity?
See, okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to show you that what you said, and now you're contradicting yourself about eternality, okay? I'm going to read from Dr. Craig's article here. He's explaining the problems, the theological problems.
I have the same article open.
Not just the problems with Scripture. He's explaining the philosophical problems with the notion of eternal generation. And now look at what he says at the bottom here. This doctrine, okay, I'll highlight the specific part I'm reading.
I have it on my screen.
This doctrine of the generation of the Logos from the Father cannot, despite assurances to the contrary, but diminish the status of the Son, because he becomes in effect contingent upon the Father. Even if this eternal process takes place necessarily and apart from the Father's will, the Son is less than the Father because the Father alone exists ase, whereas the Son exists through another. Now, do you disagree with that statement?
I don't. I fully agree with Craig in the sense of the Son being lesser than the Father in some sense, if it is the case that the Son is eternally generated. I fully agree that both the early church fathers and those who held to eternal generation do believe that the Son is lesser, both in authority and in terms of being the one generated and not the one agenerate than the Son. However, they held to the position that the Son is of the same nature as the Father. So yes, there is a subordination of authority within their view of the Trinity. Okay. Bear in mind, I don't hold this view. However, the reason why Craig is highlighting this is because he disagrees with their theology. This is not a philosophical argument. He is convinced that it makes the Son lesser than the Father. I agree with him. And I do hold to egalitarian Trinitarianism. I do believe they are equal. There is a greater authority in the Father, but the Father does not generate the Son. But my point is, Craig is absolutely correct. Why are you bringing this up in a philosophical discussion?
Why? Because it's philosophical.
This is theology. Well, theology is philosophy, but this is less relevant to what we're talking about.
No, it's not, because this is my argument. The same exact point that Craig is making is my argument.
I agree with Craig. What's the point?
The point is that no, you disagreed with Craig when in the actual review, and I can pull up if you want to show exactly for the audience what you said, you made and tried to say that it was relevant to distinguish between whether or not this causation is eternal or not. No, by the mere fact that being eternal, which is what Craig said, even if it's eternal and necessary and apart from the Father's will, it's still a problem.
At the beginning
of the discussion, my friend.
When you asked me, why does Craig believe this to be an issue? I exactly highlighted to you that he finds an issue on theological grounds because he rejects Logos Christology.
Yeah, I would agree. No, you said it was primarily based on Scripture. It's not.
It is as well, because he thinks scripturally
partly, but he has a major philosophical problem with it, which is the same one that I have.
Now, notice the issue here. You seem to point out here that because Craig believes that given generation, which is true, the Son is lesser than the Father, this somehow presents a problem to me. No one who holds to eternal generation
you're not going to do that. No, you're not going to misrepresent me.
No one who holds to eternal generation.
Misrepresent me, sir. You're not going to misrepresent me on my live stream. You're not going to misrepresent me on my live stream. No, I never said with specific to you. If you hold Dr. Craig's view then you escape the problem. The fact of the matter is, for a Christian that does not hold Craig's view or your view, then the same thing that Craig is criticizing is the same exact thing that I'm criticizing. That's
Jake,
why James White, let me finish the point. That's why James White needs to clarify and say, oh yeah, Jake, Vlad, and Craig, I agree with you guys. If that's the case and that's what they believed, then I have a problem with it, and here's my belief. But he never did that. He never actually clarified to say, well, no, I hear your argument, but here's my position. The fact of the matter is, if he agrees with what Craig is criticizing, and I'm using the exact same argument, and you agree with Craig, then by necessity, you would have to agree with me.
Notice the issue, Jake. You don't realize the extent of agreement or disagreement here. You seem to think that if I agree with Craig that the eternal generation diminishes the status of the Son as compared to the Father, I somehow believe he's lesser in the sense of deity or nature than the Father. And this is not the case. No Trinitarian who believes in eternal generation believes that the Son is equal to the Father in the sense of authority and primacy.
We're not talking about authority. We're talking about ontological.
Notice what Craig says. He says, but it diminishes the status of the Son because he becomes an effect contingent upon the Father. All who hold to eternal generation believe this. Nobody believes in egalitarian Trinitarianism if they hold to eternal generation. So the only thing you're giving us here is theology of eternal generation, which people are well aware of and agree with. What's your argument?
No. Dr. White is not aware of it. He's not aware of it. You can go check Twitter, and I can actually show you the threads where he doesn't know that the early Nicene fathers actually believed in a causal notion. Although it was eternal, they did believe in a causal notion of generation. He said no, that they don't believe that. So he is actually in the middle. He's saying that he agrees with it, but yet he doesn't agree with what it actually entails, which is the contradiction. You have two options. Either you affirm what the early church believed at Nicaea and say, here's what they believed and I agree, or you say, here's what they believe and I disagree, which is what Craig did. No, James White is in the middle and saying, no, you're both wrong. They didn't believe that. I believe in eternal generation, but it means something different. That's wrong.
Jake, when you brought up Calvin to James White, and he told you, Jake, I believe that the Son is autotheos. Even though James White is not familiar with philosophy, and in my debate review, I wrote that you won the debate. It is the case that James was totally out of his place there. If that is the case, then if he told you, well, the Son is autotheos, how didn't you at that point tell James, okay, you believe that the Son is not generate in the sense of his deity, you don't face this problem.
I did say that. I said explicitly, and I said on Twitter, but he can't get it through his thick skull.
Oh, that's a different issue if he doesn't understand.
Now, exactly. That is the issue, because you're reviewing what you need to understand, my friend, is I'm debating the person in front of me. I am not debating all of Trinitarians all across the world. I'm not debating William Lane Craig, because if I were debating William Lane Craig, I wouldn't be bringing up this issue, because I know he doesn't believe in it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So now if I don't know James White's position, and part of the reason I don't know his position is because he doesn't write with William Lane Craig and he provides no clarity to his actual position whatsoever, then am I justified in presenting an argument?
Absolutely. But I think you should have made it clear to your audience that James, well, at least if he didn't, James doesn't believe, and this argument doesn't affect him because he doesn't hold to the notion. I think it's a fair
I don't know what he believes. Up until this point, I still don't know. He's not clear about it.
He said clearly that he believes that the Son is autotheos. What else could he believe?
Yes, but when I asked him a simple question, and this was the line of questioning, is aseity a necessary attribute of God? He said yes. Then I said, is the Son Yahweh? He said yes. Then I used very specific language, and go back and watch. I said, is the person of the Son, ase. And he refused to directly answer the question because he realized the implication of it. Calvin's position, which was actually different than the early church, which I'm going to press you on this point next, is that the nature or the essence was not ase. It was a property of the Father, but the essence was not ase. And how we actually know that is because what you just said, the fathers, look at this. The fathers believed that all three persons had the same nature. We agree, right? The Orthodox fathers. Okay. Yes. If they agreed that all of them possessed the same exact nature, and yet they believed that the Father was ase and the Son and the Spirit weren't, what does that tell you? That aseity is not couched within the nature of God, because if it were, then the Son and the Spirit would possess aseity. They don't think that, and because of that, they believe that it was a personal property of the Father, which was the disagreement between the Arians and the early Orthodox Church, because the Arians said, no. What the actual divine nature is, the property of being uncaused and unbegotten. So we believe and we agree with you guys about eternal generation, but because of that, that results in them having different natures. Why? Because the Orthodox said that the property of aseity was possessed. Oh, somebody just... Okay, so the property of aseity was actually possessed not by the nature, but was a personal property of the Father, which James White and John Calvin are disagreeing with. They're saying, no, aseity is a property of the nature and not the persons, which is incorrect.
Now, notice, I think James, and I'm no scholar on Calvin, so whatever, but I think James thinks that Calvin specifically says of each of the persons that they are autotheos. Yes, it is the case that the nature of God, obviously, when you put all of the persons together, they are autotheos, or God in and of themselves, or ase. But it is also the case in Calvin's view that Jesus is not generate from the Father in the sense of being communicated deity to him. It is only the case that Jesus is being generate in the sense of the Father eternally communicating personality to him, whereas this nature that the Father and the Son share, and this personality of the Father is ase.
Okay, so wait, let's make this clear. Do we agree that Calvin's position is that the nature that all three persons possess is ase?
Yes, but he would also believe...
Did the early church Orthodox fathers believe that?
The fathers,
did they believe it was a property of the essence or a property of the Father?
It depends. So I think some of the early church fathers, according to my remembrance, speak of the Son as autotheos, God in and of himself. But it is also the case that there are early church fathers, such as, for example, Justin the Martyr, writing in 150, who would hold to the Logos Christology of the Son coming from the Father, being even the thought of the Father coming into the world. And so it really depends, but yes, by and large, they did believe in...
Well, I don't think you want to go to Justin Martyr, because in that same article that Craig wrote, we can take a look at what he said about Justin Martyr, and it's not what you believe.
Well, sure, if you want, we can. But the point is, I think Justin the Martyr is a Logos Christologian who believes in some early form of eternal generation.
Yes, but it was actually worse, because he actually believed it wasn't eternal.
Well, I'm not sure where that quote would be, but
okay. Well, I'll pull it up, but you can keep talking, and I'll try to find it.
Yeah, so I know that Justin uses, for example, the language of there being two gods, but that's a very specific language that Rob probably talked about. I didn't see his discussion. I was at church. He probably talked about like two powers in heaven, knowing Rob, and how that fits within that context. So he's not a polytheist, plainly. But I think we don't have necessarily much disagreement. Neither of us hold to eternal generation. James White doesn't hold to traditional eternal generation. And I don't think you've presented an argument which would show us that the traditional view of eternal generation as generation intra-God is problematic. And I'm asking you if you can present an argument for that.
Okay, so what I just talked about with William Lane Craig, right?
Yeah.
Are you trying to tell me that his argument doesn't apply to what you just said? So if you said that, so this is the point. If you said that to him right now, he would agree with you. He would say, oh, no, I actually agree. The problem is that if it's something outside of God, of course he doesn't believe that, because he believes that the Father is God, and yet he still thinks that it's problematic.
Jake, there's a difference between egalitarian Trinitarianism and Trinitarianism that holds to eternal generation. I'm sure that even you are familiar.
That's the point. That's the point. But you just said that Craig would agree with what you just said. No, he doesn't.
Allow me to speak. The issue Craig speaks of within this discussion, within this article, is the fact that eternal generation makes the Son subordinate in some sense to the Father. As an egalitarian Trinitarian, he does not accept that. This is not a logical issue, or an issue which would make present then a logical argument for it.
Yes, because he says that aseity, is a necessary attribute of God, such that if the Son does not possess it, then he is not truly God. That's Craig's position.
Yes, Craig actually clarifies what his position is, and he says the doctrine of the generation of the Logos from the Father cannot, despite assurances to the contrary,
I just read that before,
diminish the status of the Son because he becomes an effect contingent upon the Father, even if it's procession that takes place necessarily.
He says it's contingent.
He's still less than the Father. But the issue is, nobody disagrees that makes him less than the Father. What we're disagreeing with is that this creates a logical issue that disables him from having deity. And I'm asking you and Craig or anyone else for an argument which would demonstrate that. Say for the sake of discussion that you are right, and this is Craig's view. Craig believes that without
let me read you for Craig, okay? And then when I read this, okay, and if you don't agree at that point, then I'm going to conclude that you're dishonest and I'm kicking you off the stream. Now, Craig says this, and this is 2 paragraphs, so buckle your seat, buddy.
All right.
As we are drawing to a close, and this is in his Trinity talk, okay? Our discussion of the Trinity, I have focused on a feature of the model that I think is of some interest, and that is that the model I've offered of the Trinity of God as a tripersonal soul does not feature, though it does not preclude the derivation of one person of the Trinity from another.
Sorry, what does it say?
Let me finish, sir. Let me finish, sir. Let me finish. It does not include the notion of the Son's being eternally begotten from the Father. I suggested last time that I think it's good that the model leaves this an open question, because the doctrine of the begetting of the Son from the Father in his divine as opposed to human nature is not biblically attested. So that's correct. We agree on that point. It also seems to introduce an inevitable element of subordinationism into the Godhead, which would seem to make the Son inferior to the Son inferior to the Father, I should say, because only the Father is unbegotten, who exists in a self-existent way, and the Son has the ground of his being in the Father, and therefore has a kind of derivative existence, which to me at least seems to make the Son arguably inferior to the Father. Now next, he quotes the Church Fathers. It is very interesting to note that the early Church Fathers interpreted this Arian proof text, John 14:28, and I quote, "The Father is greater than I," not in terms of Christ's humanity, but in terms of his being generated internally from the Father. Athanasius, for example, affirms that the reason the Father is greater than the Son is because only the Father is unbegotten. Similarly, Hilary, another church father, says, and I quote, "The Father is greater than the Son, for manifestly he is greater who makes another to be all that he himself is, who imparts to the Son by the mystery of the birth the image of his own unbegotten nature, who begets him from himself into his own form." Now, Craig asks the question, doesn't that make the Son therefore inferior to the Father if the Father is the source and the origin of the Son? Hilary denies that. Hilary says, the Father, therefore, is greater because he is the Father, but the Son, because he is Son, is not less. The Father is greater than the Son, but the Son is not less than the Father, that's just to talk logical nonsense. That's like saying 6 is greater than 3, but 3 is not less than 6. That just doesn't make logical sense. And then he continues on. So he's making a logical argument to say that this is nonsense. He continues on with Basil, one of the Cappadocian church fathers, sees the contradiction in Hilary's statement, but he tries to avoid this contradiction by saying, and I quote, "The evident solution is that the greater refers to origination, while the equal belongs to the nature," which is further evidence from Basil that he thinks that it's the aseity is not couched in the nature, because if they have and are equal in the nature but are not equal in terms of causation, then it's in the person of the Father, which is James White denied. Yeah, let me finish. This is the last paragraph here. Let me finish. So what Basil is saying is that the Father is greater in terms of origination because he is unbegotten, whereas the Son is begotten. But in terms of the nature, they are both the same because they share the same nature. They are equal. This reply seems to me to raise all kinds of difficult questions. Doesn't it belong to the nature of the Father as an individual person to be unbegotten? And doesn't it belong to the nature of the Son as an individual person to be begotten? Or is there a possible world in which the Father is begotten and not unbegotten? Classical Trinitarian theology would deny this. So how are the Father and the Son equal in nature if greatness refers to origination and the manner of their origination is essential to their divine natures? If you think about it, he says, suppose that they are equal in nature, but the Father has the contingent property of being unbegotten, and the Son has the contingent property of being unbegotten. In that case, they have the same nature, but the Father still has this contingent property of being unbegotten, a property the Son lacks. Wouldn't that make him greater than the Son, at least in this respect? It would seem to me that it would. And then he goes on to say, so at the end of the day, what Basil has to say is that self-existence is not, after all, a perfection or great-making property. He says, and I quote, "That which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of the unoriginate because it is from the unoriginate." That seems to me to be not a convincing answer. To be dependent upon the unoriginated being for one's existence is to lack a ground of being in oneself alone, and that surely is not as great as to be self-existent being, which is able to exist all on one's own. It has the grounds of existence in and of itself. This kind of derivation being the same way in which creatures exist. Creatures exist in virtue of being caused by another. So, despite the protestations to the contrary, it does seem to me that Nicene orthodoxy has not completely shed the sort of subordinationism that was introduced into the doctrine of the Trinity by the early Greek apologists with their Logos doctrine. So he clearly thinks that aseity is a great-making property, and if you actually know perfect being theology, he thinks that aseity is a great-making property such that if the Son lacks it, then he cannot be God.
Yeah. So notice some of the things that Jake has done in showing us how he knows to read in reading a very long portion of Fig's
I do know how to read.
That's very good. I congratulate you. So the first point to make, which he read almost at the very beginning of the article, is, let me read the sentence. Finally, such a model, the model that Craig presents for the Trinity, does not feature, in his own belief, though it does not preclude the derivation of one person from another enshrined in the convention of the Son as begotten of the Father before all worlds.
That's right.
Now, after that, Craig goes on to criticize some of the explanations of eternal generation that the early church fathers give, which I would say as well are sometimes somewhat problematic. But notice the extrapolation Jake brings forth. Jake says that therefore it must be the case that the Son cannot be God, given that he is not ase. Now,
he says it's a great making property.
I think, yeah. Now,
he says
you
aseity
also
is great
said
making
that,
property.
Yeah. Now, how is it the case that aseity is being possessed within the persons? If it is the case that Craig holds to the Trinity being God, Trinity is God, then it is the case that the being, the triune being, can possess aseity. That is to say, it is not dependent on anything else for origination, while the Son himself is originate, which is why he says his model does not preclude it. It is just that he personally has an issue with subordinationism.
I never precluded it. What my point is, and this is a simple point, okay, that in terms of perfect being theology, great making properties are how you derive a concept of God, such that he thinks if the person of the Son lacks aseity and also at the same time rejects his model, seems like you're losing connection there. You're spinning in circles, but I'll finish what I'm saying. If you reject Craig's model also, and at the same time, you say that you don't think that the Son has aseity, then Craig has a major problem with that. He has a huge problem with you rejecting that the Son has aseity because it makes him a derivative being. And if aseity is a great making property and the Son lacks it, then he cannot be God. This is Craig's position. This is Ryan Mullen's position, who I've interviewed on my show, who's actually in touch with Craig. I've spoken to him directly, and I can send him this afterwards, and he will explain to you that this is Craig's position. Now, unfortunately, Vlad has left the stream. So anyway, we can move on to the next guest here, because the fact of the matter is, okay, is that if you understand what perfect being theology is, perfect being theology says that God is by necessity, he's a perfect being. God is the most perfect being. And they come up with all these properties and they say, these are what's called attributes of perfection. And then they build a model of God and they say, if God doesn't have these things, or a being doesn't have these things like necessity, aseity, omniscience, omnipotence, omnibenevolence, if God doesn't have these properties, then he's not God. That's what perfect being theology is. So when he says that he rejects this position because it results in subordinationism, he's not talking about relationally, he's talking about in an ontological sense. And he also cast out the fact that they would have the same nature. This is explicit in the other writing as well, the one that we were reading from earlier. Now, I think we should move on here to the next guest. We've got Xavier, I think, on the line. I think we should move on here to the next guest. Xavier, are you there? Can you mute the video in the background? Xavier, are you there? Can you mute your Xavier, if you're not there, I'm going to have to go to the next person. All right. Take care, buddy. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you're not available. Okay. Let's go to the next guest. Who do we have here? Stand on Scripture, Unitarian. Okay. Yeah. How's it going?
Going good. Going good. How are you doing?
Good. Do you have any quick comments?
Yeah, basically, I was listening to some of the things that the Trinitarian was saying and some of the messages in the private chat in regards to the church fathers and how they come up with their views and opinions why Jesus is supposed to be God because the church fathers say so, but I, as a Unitarian, don't really hold to the church fathers, couldn't really care less what they say. The Bible clearly says, especially with Justin Martyr, as you were saying before, Justin Martyr is well known as Justin the philosopher. And the Bible says, do not be taken by empty philosophy, talking about these people that will go take them antichrist. Also, there's a verse, Daniel 7:25, which calls these people antichrists, talking about the end times, changing times, laws, and the Trinitarian Catholics changed Passover to Easter on a set day every year. It's a pagan festival from Eos 3. Christmas obviously derives from that paganism as well, and changed the Sabbath from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset to Sunday, which is clearly changing the commandments, changing the times, and changing days to fit their own narrative under Constantine. Their whole religion is not biblical at all. Finally, I would actually say that 1 Corinthians 15, verse 27 to 28 clearly shows that Jesus is not God. It says God puts everything under Jesus. When it says everything, it doesn't include God himself. So God is a singular person. Then it says in the next verse, Jesus is made submissive to God. I don't know how that makes him God.
Yeah, I mean, and Jesus also says, "My Lord and my God." So I don't think God has a God. If he does, then we've got a big problem. But what would you, just if you want to give your last comments, maybe it seems like you're saying one of the things that you think is problematic with Trinitarians is that they venture into philosophy too much, and that's where they went wrong instead of sticking with Scripture. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, there's a verse, I think it's in 1 John or something, that indicates to it. It says there were some that were of us. People probably would have been being taught under John and the other apostles, but they went out doing their own things, coming up with their own beliefs, and they were not of us. If they were truly of us, they would have remained with us. Basically talking about antichrist spirits in them, going out, basically teaching against them. You never find anywhere in the Bible Jesus being God at all.
Yeah. And somebody pointed out, I may have misquoted it. What I was referring to is when Jesus, calls out to God and says, my God. So with that being said, Mr. Stand, I'm sorry to call you that, but I don't know your name. I think I'm going to move on to the next guest because I've only got maybe 25 more minutes, if that's okay.
No worries. That's fine. I just wanted to say that.
All right. Take care, buddy. Have a good one.
Catch you later.
All right. Who else do we have here? Mr. Latino and Proud.
Okay, so I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you a Trinitarian?
Yes.
Go for it.
All right, my question, obviously you have a problem with Trinitarians because, you have a problem with God entering his creation, right?
No, that's not the only problem, though.
Is that one of the problems?
That's more with the incarnation, not necessarily Trinity.
Yeah, but you have a problem with that, right?
Not in reference to the Trinity, no.
But do you have a problem with God entering his creation?
In terms of what? Can you give an example? You mean the Son becoming flesh?
Like the Word becoming flesh, yeah.
Yes.
Or any theophany or...
You have a problem with the Son becoming flesh. Yes, I do.
Okay, so where in the Quran or Hadith does it say that God cannot enter his creation?
God is not dependent upon anything.
Where does it say in the Quran or Hadith that God cannot enter his creation?
I just told you.
No, you didn't.
Allahu Samad. That means he's not dependent upon anything. When he enters into creation and takes on flesh, he becomes dependent upon things.
No. I don't think you're understanding my question.
Yes, I am. I'm answering it. You're just not liking the answer you're getting.
No, because I asked you where in the Quran.
I just gave it to you.
Say
okay,
that
how
God
about this?
Latino,
Mr. Latino. Where does it say that God is a Trinity in the Bible?
Well, it's derived from the Bible.
Okay,
but you're not answering my question.
And in the same way, if you want to be charitable, sir, in the same way that I don't press you and make those silly, stupid Muslim arguments that you hear. Where does it say Trinity in the Bible? I don't do that on my stream. You've essentially done that from a Trinitarian side and say, where does it say these exact words that God cannot enter into his creation? No, I told you it's derived from the principle that he's not dependent upon anything or continuing contingent upon anything. He's ase, self-sufficient, and independent of all that exists. Is that
yeah,
correct?
you can say that Allah is independent of his creation. That's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
but
your God is
why?
not. Your God
But
is not.
you're putting, okay, that's just an assertion that you're making, but you're putting
Your God is
a
dependent
limit.
eternally, now everlastingly, upon a human body.
Dude, I'm asking you where it says that Allah cannot enter his creation.
I just gave you the
and
answer.
you're saying, oh, well, Allah is independent of his creation.
I just gave you the answer. I said that the Quran explicitly states that he cannot be dependent upon his creation. The fact of him literally becoming flesh would make him dependent upon his creation, which would be a contradiction. Thank you very much, sir. Next. You want to play games, you're out of here, buddy. I'm not playing games. I don't make these silly arguments and come on here and say, oh, where does it say Trinity in the Bible? No, I don't do that. Now you're going to tell me, where does it exactly say the words that God exactly says God cannot enter into his creation? I mean, come on, ridiculous, man. Get off the stream. This is not what this is the first time, and this event has gone well so far, even though I have to talk like this because, see, part of the reason I'm hyped up is with these couple knuckleheads, Mr. Rob and Vlad, okay? They partially mocked me on their streams, and we're on a stream where people are mocking me and want to challenge me on terms of what I know and what I don't know. I know what I'm talking about, okay? You could disagree with me, but don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's what I have a problem with. Now, who else we have here? We've got brother Sammy here. If you want to make a quick comment, buddy.
Yeah, I want to have a discussion on the Old Testament aspect of the Trinity. The second thing I want to talk about is, in the debate, you said, how can you show, to James White, that the Trinity is not polytheistic? Maybe I want to have a discussion on that too. Third, maybe on, I want you to define what
well, we've got like 20 minutes left, so you got to pick the one that you want to talk about the most. I'm sorry, but we took too long with the other guest. And you got to mute whatever you're playing in the background.
I understand. There's nothing I'm playing in the background.
Well, I can hear myself. There's a really bad echo. There's a bad echo. And now you're breaking up.
What about now?
You got a bad echo and you got bad service. Try again next time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Try again next time. Xavier, I'm going to try you one more time, buddy, but last time you didn't come on, so are you there or not? Xavier, are you there?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, but you got the same problem as the other guy. You got to mute your stream.
Can you hear me now?
You got to mute the stream that you're playing. Yes, I can, but you got the same problem as the other. Are you able to hear me? Xavier? I'm sorry. You guys, listen, you guys are waiting in the background so long. I mean, you can't come correct with the proper mic. Come on, man. This is ridiculous. JS, what's up, dude? Your mic is muted, man. Come on.
I couldn't stop laughing at Latino and Proud. Dude, clip that, cut that out, use that. Fuck, that's funny. Anyway, don't put me on your show, bro. People don't want to see.
All right, JS, take it easy, dude. All right. Thank you for your time, young fella. Now, we've got a couple people. Honestly, I'm not going to take any more other than the two guys I already talked to. Maybe I'll bring them on for a couple minutes at the end, and then we'll kind of close it out because I got to jump to another stream after this at in 20 minutes, 3:30. We're going to be doing a review of the discussion we had with what was his name? Oh, Apostate Prophet. So we're going to be doing a review of the discussion with Apostate Prophet on Tap channel, which is the Thought Adventure podcast. So actually, let me drop that link here in the chat. 1 second. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat so that you guys, if you want to head over to that afterwards, you can join me there. And again, I was in a discussion with these people here. So I do apologize for not acknowledging the super chats. I want to acknowledge that and give a shout out to everybody that sent a super chat in the chat. Really do appreciate it. So my apologies for not being able to get to that. So I replaced the pinned message so that you won't be able to see the link anymore. I'm going to go to Ahmed here. Hello.
Yo,
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sorry, I was kind of zoned out for a second. Were you taking questions?
If you want to just give a quick comment or a question on anything related to the Trinity, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'd like to obviously say start by saying that I saw your debate with James White. It was absolutely phenomenal, right? I actually kind of had a question. It was regarding an interview you had with Joshua Sijuwadi on your channel.
Yeah.
So I vividly recall, right? He kind of held to this notion of when it comes to atheity, it's actually regarding kind of if it's necessary or not, and he held the view that it's intrinsically necessary, and he kind of made this distinguished kind of train thought of like external versus internal essential attributes.
Yeah, that was with Ryan Mullins.
Yeah. So what would your take be on that? Is that a valid distinction to make in terms of aseity?
I think it's valid in the sense that I believe there's a difference between intrinsic and extrinsic properties. I don't think it's valid in the sense that I don't think that aseity is an extrinsic property. And part of my problem with it is, so there's a few things, and I didn't share my thoughts on that one because I was more of a moderator, so I didn't really step in with that discussion between Ryan and Josh. But what I would say is, and this is a bit complicated, so I don't know if you remember, but there's 4 criteria. And actually, before I go into that, I do want to point out that Josh is a Catholic, and he tries to be orthodox in terms of the Nicene Creed. And if you notice, he holds that only the Father's ase and the Son and the Spirit are not, and that aseity is a property of the Father, not of the divine essence. So that's something very important to know and understand. Second thing is, when it comes to the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic properties, I agree that there is a difference. However, I don't believe that aseity is extrinsic because I reject Josh's criteria for what it means to be an intrinsic property. Specifically, criterion B, he says that in order for a property to be considered intrinsic, it must have the ability for it to be lacked by a lonely object. And that lonely object is general. It doesn't have to be specifically God. It could be, in his example, it could be a rock. Now, there's 2 important things to note about the fact that it could be a rock. Even though it's a hypothetical example, I would say that the notion of a single lonely object that is not God, that is a rock, is logically impossible. Now, why do I say that? Because I believe that God is a necessary being. And if God is a necessary being, then it means he exists in all possible worlds, which means the hypothetical of a lonely object being anything other than God is a logical impossibility. So part of the problem with Josh's criteria is, in order to establish that aseity is not an intrinsic property, it has to posit the ability for there to be a lonely object, which would be a rock, which would be ase. So the rock would have the property of being ase or self-existence because there's literally nothing else that exists in order for it to depend on. Now, he thinks that that is a logical possibility. the entailment of that makes God contingent, because God does not exist in all possible worlds, because there's a possible world in which only one object exists, and that object is not God, it's a rock. Now, me, and for most classical theists, that is flat out absurd. To say that God is contingent and not necessary is a fundamental problem. So that's the second point. Third point is that even if I granted the hypothetical for the sake of argument, to say that in order for a property to be intrinsic, it must have the ability for a lonely object to lack it, I think is false. Why? I'll give one specific example. Think about the property of oneness, okay? If you take oneness to be an actual real property of objects, then could oneness ever be lacked by a lonely object? No, it couldn't, because the object, for it to be alone, means for there to be nothing else besides it. That means there's only one thing. What that results in is that the property of oneness does not meet the criterion in order for Josh to consider it an intrinsic property. And I've had a private conversation about this with him, and I do plan on making a video about it, of explaining why I think this criteria is false. But he actually responded and said that yes, he has to bite the bullet and say one of two things. Either that oneness is not a property at all, which I think is flat out absurd, because if oneness is not a property, then I don't know what a property is. Or two, say that oneness is a property, but because it cannot be lacked by a lonely object, that it would have to entail that it's an extrinsic property. Now, both of those options to me are flat out absurd. I don't think that oneness is not a property. I think oneness is a property. And I don't think that oneness could possibly be an extrinsic property. So if both of those are false, that leads me to believe that oneness is an intrinsic property, and yet it doesn't meet criterion B, which means criterion B is false. So that's another reason why I reject his categorization that a satiety, in order for it to be intrinsic, must have the ability for it to be lacked by a lonely object. Now, I know that was a very detailed explanation into the deep metaphysics of the discussion, but that's how it had to be in order for me to explain it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. That was more than enough for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so, thanks again. Right.
All right, I appreciate it, Ahmed. Take care. All right.
All right.
All right. So Xavier, honestly, dude, I gave you 2 chances. I'm going to give you a 3rd chance. And then if you don't show up on the screen after like 15 seconds, you're just going to be banned completely from the studio. So Xavier, do you have your mic ready? Can you hear me and can you speak?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So this is your 3rd time's the charm. So all those people that said that Jake wasn't a nice guy, you're going to tell them that they're wrong, right? Because I let you on for a 3rd time.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I haven't even watched you before, so I don't have any opinions on you. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask. I was watching the stream for a bit, and I heard you talk to the other guy and say, if we are applying the divine essence in a qualitative sense to say that the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God, but it's only qualitative in the same way that Superman is strong and Batman is strong, then we can't escape the fact that that is 3 gods. I just wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit more, because I do think that is a reasonable objection, and I do think there are answers to it, but I don't think you touched on it too deeply. So
yeah, so for me, if you have, and it went to the thing with Rob where, I don't know, it got a little weird when there was 3 Supermen, yet 1 Superman. It was a bit weird. But, and maybe we can get a clarification on that another time. But I think if you have 3 things, which are the Father, Son, and Spirit, and they each fully possess what it means to be God, that necessarily results in 3 gods. Now, why do I say that? Because when I ask what is the principle by which they are one, typically the answer is to say, well, they're one because they all possess the exact same universal divine nature. Well, if that's the case, and we think that there are things that are universal natures within creation, such as humanity, which Gregory of Nyssa actually brings up, then it would literally, in an analogous sense, result in saying, well, Xavier is a man, Jake is a man, and Rob is a man. they're not three men, they're actually one man because they all possess the universal same human nature. Now, for me, that's flat out absurd because we would say, no, they're actually three men. And what Gregory of Nyssa has to do is he literally says that no, strictly speaking, there's only one man. So in the same way, if you think that that's absurd and there's actually three men, is the same reason why I would have a problem with saying there's only one God in that case.
Yeah, I think you're referring to St. Gregory's work on not three gods. But yeah, he does use that predicating of nature. But he also says for the three persons of the Trinity that in that sense of unity, if that doesn't convince the people who raise the objection on three gods, there is also one common operation in a way that there is nothing like in creation. So, for example, we see that the Father searches the minds and the hearts. We see Christ knows that the people around him are planning evil against him, and we see the Spirit searching things as well. And, you know, we don't need to go into scriptural references and so on. But regardless, since we see that the three persons have a common operation as well as a common nature, in the sense that, let's say if we had three philosophers, they would have a common nature, if you will, but they would be doing three separate things. Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato would philosophize about three separate things, but the three hypostases or the three persons of the Trinity are doing the exact same ad extra operation every single time. So that's also a way we would say that they are one. So I don't see the objection.
Well, then that's just a different. Yeah, then that's just moving to a different argument. Are you an Eastern Orthodox Christian?
No, I'm Catholic.
Okay, you're Catholic. So,
I don't
I want to make a distinction. These are two different. So when I ask, well, what makes them one? Yes, Gregory gives us an example, and Dr. Branson, who I've had on the show, he thinks that it's precisely for the reason that you just said. He thinks that, well, it's just kind of an analogy or example to get you off the ground for the common person maybe to understand. It might work for some people, might not work for other people. Fine, I can be charitable to that and say, well, for me, it doesn't work. Okay. And then we move on to the next point, so he moves from what's called the unity of nature argument to unity of action. Okay. This is how Dr. Branson explains it. And I think it's a fair characterization based on what you just said. Now, again, the problem with the unity of action argument is there doesn't seem to be anything to me in the same way about having one nature, that just because they all have the same exact type and token actions, that doesn't meet, to me, is too thin of a line for monotheism, because we can have an example in which, forget about three persons, let's say there were 10 persons or 20 or an infinite number of persons, all with the same exact will performing the exact same action. Would somebody naturally conclude that there's literally only one God? No, to me, intuitively, that doesn't make sense. It's too thin of a definition of monotheism that I just don't accept.
Okay, yeah, but with respect, I mean, we're not really talking about hypotheticals here, but I do understand that you're saying, if there were 1 million persons who were performing the same operation, we would still say, according to scripture, if the revelation was given that there were 1 million persons, that there is one God, because there is one operation, there's one essence. And yeah, I'm not Eastern Orthodox, so I don't affirm a real distinction between the two, but it's not physically possible for three distinct beings to do the exact same operation at the same time. At least
I'm not
in the way we
that.
perceive.
Okay, I'm not disputing that it's impossible for that to happen. I'm simply saying I don't think it's a truth maker for monotheism.
Okay, so what would be the defeater for the argument that one operation in the three persons is too weak of a line, as you said, for monotheism? I mean, I don't understand what that exactly means. Is it monotheism or is it not?
I don't think it's monotheism, no.
Why not?
Because the example I said is that if it's predicated merely on the fact of unity of action, meaning that they're all performing the exact same token and type actions, then yes, in terms of philosophy, if you want to stick it to scripture, then I mean, and the tradition in the case of Catholicism, then yeah, okay, you can be consistent within your worldview. But I'm saying externally, to me, the idea from a philosophical perspective that results from this definition of monotheism is that you could literally have 1 billion persons all with the same type and token actions, and yet there only being one God. Now, if you think that that's true, then I lose count or really an understanding of what it means for there to be one God. If you don't think it's true, then what that does is that demonstrates that although that may be a necessary condition for monotheism, it's not necessarily sufficient. There must be something else that makes you say, well, it's still one in the case of 3 persons with the same action, but it's not one God in the case of 1 billion persons with the same action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand your concern, but just to go to the ground roots, and forgive me, I don't watch you very much. What for you is the defining factor of there being one God, if not for essence and operation?
Yeah, I don't think it's about one essence and operation. I think that we could include that in terms of it being a necessary attribute, but I don't think it's necessarily sufficient. I would also think that oneself would be necessary in order for there to be one God. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, because obviously Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are 3 selves, if you will, 3 persons. I think you're just redefining person here.
Well, I mean, see, the issue is it depends how you define person, because how, for example, St. Thomas Aquinas defines a person, and how somebody like I don't know if you were here at the point where a guy who was representing William Lane Craig would define a person, are radically different. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't paying attention for the full time, but yeah, I did see that guy. But yeah, if wherever there is an operation in relation, then we could say that in the Trinity, at least, then there is a person.
So let me give an example. Would you, as a Catholic, and if you're familiar with it, how would you define person? Would you understand it more how Thomas Aquinas understood it, meaning basically merely a difference in relation alone? Or would you understand it more like a social Trinitarian and William Lane Craig?
Yeah, more like St. Thomas. Yeah.
Okay, so then would you agree that social Trinitarianism seems to have a problem with there being 3 gods or polytheism?
Yeah, since as well, William Lane Craig says that there are 3 minds in God, and he denies divine simplicity. So
okay, yeah. So
strictly speaking, that is polytheism. Yes.
Right. So then now we're on more common ground. We're getting somewhere, because now we're adding an additional thing. Because imagine this. Imagine you had William Lane Craig's model in terms of 3 minds and 3 centers of self-consciousness, but you also included that they all have the same type and token action. I think that you would admit that that would still be problematic. And if that's the case, that shows that there's another condition besides merely unity of action, which is if we talk about 3 centers of self-consciousness, even if they have the same action, that seems to be like 3 gods, dude. And I think if you agree with me on that, then that's what I'm saying. I'm adding that as an additional thing, that I don't think you can have 3 minds and it be one God. Would you agree?
But the thing is, we say, or at least St. Thomas says, that God's intellect is
one.
Yeah, it's because of it's an act of his substance, if you will. So we would say that it's impossible for there to be 3 minds in God yet one essence, because the mind is of the essence, if you will, in simple language.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But then, and I do have to run because I have to go to another stream. It's 3:30, and my co-hosts are bugging me. But I think this is a good place to end, because I think I would like to talk to you more, but we ended, I think, on common ground that social Trinitarianism is problematic, even if it had unity of action, which means that I'm saying that another component is that there has to be one intellect. If there's 3 intellects, so that's another criteria that I'm adding. I would add to that. Now you would fulfill that criteria, because you would say, yes, Jake, I agree, there's only one intellect. But then I would have a problem on a different level of saying that there's three persons in God and yet there's only one intellect. For me, Thomas Aquinas' position is absurd in the way that it defines person. So it doesn't have the problem of tritheism in the same way that a social Trinitarian would, but I do think it runs the risk of modalism in the fact of how it defines persons. But unfortunately, I cannot continue. I really apologize. I have to go. But Xavier, maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, no problem. All right, see you. God bless.
All right, take care. So Rob and Vlad, if you're still here, literally going to bring you back on the stream just for 2 minutes, and then I do have to go because my co-hosts are wondering where I'm at. So I'll bring you both on at the same time to maybe make a final comment, and then we can call it a day. Do you have any final comments?
Vlad, go
Alrighty.
for it.
Yeah, well, it was just a pleasure talking to you, Jake. I'm sure to be here again if you host another one anytime soon. My debate challenge to you is still open, although I know you don't want to accept it. And I'm glad we could have that discussion on Craig, where I think I demonstrated from his own papers that the idea that the church fathers are holding is entirely compatible with his Trinitarianism, but that Craig himself has a philosophical, or more precisely speaking, theological issue with assigning a aseity to a nature instead of a person. You didn't.
I never argued that point. So the fact that you think,
okay, well, we have a video.
Yeah, the fact that you think that I argued that point is incorrect. No, what I argued is that the same thing that Craig said, that aseity, in its essence, aseity is a great making property, and such that if a being or a person does not possess aseity, then that is problematic. Now, James White specifically, I never even actually got to really go into depths with the argument because he never clearly stated what exactly his position was, which was part of the problem. Okay, so and I have already challenged him. Okay, I've already challenged him on Twitter to debate me specifically on the traditional Nicene understanding of eternally begotten and the concept of aseity, which I don't think that he understands.
Mm-hmm. So just my final question before I hand it over to Rob here, and I believe he also wants to ask you something. So Craig holds that aseity is a great making property, and as such, if the Son as a person does not have it, he would be less than God. That is your position. But I'm asking you, what sort of argument do you make to show that it could not be the case that aseity is only necessary for the being and that internal causation isn't problematic, neither in the debate with White, which is understandable because he didn't really go there, or a discussion with me here, did you present an argument as to that regard?
Yes, the same argument that Craig does, that the being, so the difference between Craig's view and how that wouldn't work on his model is because he does.
Of course it would. He said it would.
No, he didn't. Listen, let me finish. Craig couches aseity. Let me finish here, sir. Okay. Craig couches aseity in terms of the being. But if you have the persons internally that the Father causes the Son and the Spirit, right? If you have this Father that causes the Son and the Spirit, then the idea of saying that the Son could possess aseity in terms of the one being would be nonsense, because you cannot be caused to be ase. That literally is a contradiction in terms.
Okay, but notice the issue. It is Craig holding to the position that if a person is to be caused, the person itself cannot be ase. I understand that Craig holds to aseity of the being itself. My point is, what sort of a contradiction do either you or Craig or anyone else impose on internal causation as opposed to external causation? In other words, why do you think it is not a great making property to be necessary in being, to be necessary completely, and to be ase in being, but to be caused in regards to your deity or in regards to your personality.
Yeah, because you can't.
What sort of an argument have you presented for that?
Yeah, because you can't be caused to exist and yet be ase. That's a contradiction in terms.
I understand. I agree that it's not aseity. My question is, what sort of a problem does having internal causation?
Because then you lack aseity. Because then you lack aseity.
But the lack of aseity is an issue due to external causation for deity.
No, it's not. It's not external. It's internal.
Well, yeah, but my point is that's not an issue.
If you're talking about within the Trinity, if you mean within the Trinity internally, if that's what you mean, yes, it's still problematic because...
Why present an argument?
Because I've explained it several times. You just don't get it. Because of the fact that when you talk about aseity, it's to have existence in and of oneself, which is referring to the person, which means that if you're caused to exist by another, then you don't have aseity, and that means that you are not God, plain and simple.
But you seem to be repeating it without arguing it, Jake.
Yes,
that's my issue.
I am arguing it. I am arguing it. I'm telling you that to say that two things can happen simultaneously, meaning that you can be caused and yet be ase, do you agree that that's a contradiction?
I do.
Okay.
My issue is
then,
you not being...
What's the issue? What's the issue then?
My point is that lacking aseity because of internal causation is not the same issue as lacking aseity because of external causation.
Yeah, that's your claim. I don't agree to that. That's the whole point. There's no difference. There's no difference between lacking aseity, meaning being caused by another eternal person, versus something else, which is exactly why. And now I'm going to read the quote that Craig
just quickly
read.
check.
The last thing here from Craig, what he actually said on this issue. What did he say? He said the kind of derivation being. This kind of derivative being is the same way in which creatures exist. Creatures exist in virtue of being caused by another. So he is saying, and he is referring at that point to internal, because he's not referring to another God that caused the Son. No, he's referring to the Father causing the Son, and he is arguing that that internal causation still results in something analogous to creator-creature
My question
relationship.
is, what is your argument? Not if you can.
I just told you what Craig said. No, because you said that Craig disagreed with me, but I just demonstrated that Craig actually agrees with me.
Okay,
that he thinks that it's eternal. He thinks that he thinks it's analogous to creation. That's what he thinks.
Jack, do you see how this has come full circle?
Jake.
Yes, it has.
No. Full circle in the sense of what we were discussing as well. Like, I don't know, Vlad, if you
you guys have been demonstrated that you don't know what you're talking about. You've misrepresented William Lane Craig. I just explained to you that Craig is not making a distinction.
He's not.
Craig
is not
making. Yes, he is. Craig is not making a distinction. Craig is not making a distinction between what you're saying is internal and external causation. No, he's not.
Craig.
What he is saying is that if anybody causes another to exist, that results in a creator-creation relationship. That's his claim. He does not make the caveat that you're making. He makes a general claim.
Jake, it's come full
circle. Show me where he makes the distinction.
Because Craig is basically explaining to you how I try to explain to you using analogies from Proverbs 8 and the Second Temple philosophers like Philo.
First of all, Proverbs 8, do you accept the Septuagint in that respect or in Hebrew?
Both kind of affirm that same reading.
No, they can't.
In verse 22 onwards.
The Septuagint actually says it's created.
No.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't mean it that way. Because if you keep reading through the passage.
Anyway,
my point is.
Anyway, I gotta go.
Just quickly. Well, I need to make my closing as well very quickly. I'm not going to make an argument because I know you need to go. But my point is that notice I was getting at this theologically and with scripture, and then that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin was you talking with Vlad about it philosophically. And when you said you don't care about the scripture, and then
I don't.
With the same breath to Vlad, you're like, oh, but let's care about the scripture in this sense. So which is
when did I say I cared about the scripture with Vlad?
You, with respect to your discussion about Craig. It's like, oh, now it goes back to the scripture.
What do you mean with Craig? No. Craig, he says that eternally begotten, he doesn't believe it's scriptural. So when you talk about Proverbs 8, he doesn't actually accept that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is he makes a philosophical argument to say, and he does not distinguish between this nonsense that you guys are coming up with, internal versus external. No, he says that if you are caused by another, this is creator-creation relationship. If you can't get that, then I'm sorry, you're dead.
And so that's the philosophical discussion at
exactly.
hand.
And he's denying that. And your friend is denying that. Your
no,
friend is actually saying that no, actually Craig agrees with him and says that it's okay, and that he makes a distinction between internal and external causation. He doesn't. He says in a general sense, after commenting on the supposed internal causation, he says, no, this is wrong because it results in a creator-creation relationship. He doesn't say, oh, it's okay because it's internal, but it's not okay if it's external. He never says that. So you guys are dishonest. See you later, buddy. Dishonest people, honestly. So I demonstrated to these knuckleheads coming on the stream, these jokers coming on the stream, okay, trying to tell me that Craig is actually okay with supposed internal causation, but he's not okay with external causation. Let me read it for the audience one last time, because these guys are so dense that they can't even see it. Craig, after commenting on, so notice, Craig is arguing against a traditional model, not an external model of another God causing a different God. No, he's not. He's commenting on the supposed internal causal relations between the Father and the Son. And what does he say by concluding this? After he quotes Basil, that which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of the unoriginate, because it is from the unoriginate. He quotes Basil. Then he says, that seems to me to be a not convincing answer. Notice he's exactly refuting you. These guys are so dense, they can't get it. Listen to this quote once again. See, they're making a distinction. Notice what they're doing. They're making a distinction between a supposed internal causation and an external causation. They're saying external, meaning if it's other than the one being, if it's outside of the one being, so it's outside of the one being Yahweh that exists, then it's a problem. No, notice what the quote says. Basil makes the same argument that these guys are. Basil says that which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which a cause. Why? Because of what they're saying. For it would share the glory of the unoriginate, because it's from the unoriginate. So his argument is because it's not external and because it's internal within Yahweh itself, that means that it would not make the caused inferior to the cause. So Craig is directly refuting that. He says, no, that seems to me to be not a convincing answer. To be dependent upon the unoriginated being. Notice what he says. Direct refutation of you. Honestly, you guys are so either dense or dishonest. Read the quote. That seems to me to not be a convincing answer. To be dependent on what? The unoriginated being for one's existence is to lack a ground of being in oneself alone. So he doesn't say it's external. He says the unoriginated being. If the unoriginated being causes the Son to exist, he says that that's problematic because the Son still doesn't have self-existence. It has the ground of existence. It doesn't have the ground of existence in and of itself. And then what he follows it up with, after quoting on exactly what Basil said, what these guys are saying, this kind of derivative being is the same way in which creatures exist. Creatures exist in virtue of being caused by another. So, despite protestations to the contrary, what these guys are doing, they're trying to give protestations to the contrary. It does seem to me that the Nicene Orthodoxy has not completely shed the sword of subordinationism that was introduced into the doctrine of the Trinity by early Greek apologists with their Logos doctrine. So, once again, I'm going to repeat it one last time, and then I'm going to tap, because I tapped these guys out. They're already tapped out. Bunch of clowns. After Basil gives the argument that they're giving, oh, it's not external because it's from the originate being and he caused the Son, there's no problem. No, Craig says that's not a convincing answer. To be dependent upon the originated being for one's existence is to lack a ground of being in oneself alone. And surely this is not as great to be a self-existent being, which is able to exist all on one's own. It has the ground of its existence in itself. This kind of derivative being, which is the one that they're talking about, internal from the unoriginated being to the Son, is the same way in which creatures exist. Creatures exist in virtue of being caused by another. So again, despite protestations to the contrary, it does not seem, no matter what Rob and Mr. Vlad want to say, no matter what they want to say, it does not seem to Craig that Nicene Orthodoxy has not completely shed the sort of subordinationism that was introduced into the doctrine of the Trinity by the early Greek apologists with their Logos doctrine. So, sorry, but Craig, not only does he not make the distinction between internal causation within the being, as if that's not problematic, he not only does not make the distinction to say that that's okay, but external is not okay. He actually brings that point up and then refutes it and says it's wrong because it results in a creator-creation relationship. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate everybody for joining the stream. Sorry it had to get heated, but these little clowns are joining the stream trying to challenge me, Jake the Muslim Metaphysician. Okay, they're trying to challenge me when they don't know their ass from their elbow. Sorry to tell you, these little kids, they don't know their ass from their elbow. Now, with that being said, I once again appreciate all the viewers, appreciate the members for joining today. Anybody who sent super chats, much love all you guys. Do consider becoming a patron at the link that's shown on the screen below, or you could just type in Muslim Metaphysician Patreon. Also, the link is in the description of this video and all my other videos. Also, consider clicking the join button to become a member. Help out. It really does help with the support for getting this channel to continue to go, because I have a regular job. I've got a family and stuff to do. So any help that you guys can give is much appreciated. At the very least, click that like button, give this video a thumbs up, share it on your social media platforms. And if you haven't subscribed already, what the heck is going on, guys? I don't know. I really don't know. But head over to Tap. The link to the Tap stream is in the description. We're about to go roast AP. I'm already fired up, so I'm ready to go. So if you want to see what's going to happen over there, if you're not watching at the same time, head over there, guys. Now, until next time, guys, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.